Hi there, I'm Scott Lowe with ActualTech Media, and thank you for joining us for our VMworld 2019 live stream. I'm joined right now by Bruce Milne, who is the Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer for Pivot3. Bruce, thank you for coming to the studio.
Thank you very much for having me.
So there's some really great stuff happening on Pivot3. I mean, you and I have talked quite a few times over the last few months.
Yep.
You guys have had a number of announcements. You've focused on a number of really critical use cases. What are some of the things that are happening on Pivot3 right now, particularly around some of the targeted businesses that you've been going after?
Well, we compete in a very dynamic space with a lot of very big competitors, and what we found is that we compete extremely well in a few key areas where we provide exceptional services to customers. And if a customer can self-identify their use case as mission critical, then we tend to do very well and serve their needs better than anybody else in the marketplace, especially if there's streaming media, IoT sensor data, video camera streaming media, that sort of thing. Pivot3 is the only hyper-converged vendor in the marketplace that's really instrumented to handle that. So the use cases that we see are specific applications like creating a safe airport, a safe campus, a smart city, safe transit systems, which are a linear campus, which is a very different kind of model where there's a lot of edge and core federation required there. Smart casinos and safe hospitality, those types of applications. On top of that, and sort of expanding into adjacencies, we also do extremely well in virtual desktop implementations in healthcare. Education is an obvious corollary of our work in campuses, and then in the federal market. Because of our architecture, some of the unique things we do with hyper-converged, we can support the very customized, very data-intensive applications in the Fed space better than anybody else.
And a lot of that has to do with the fact that you have an NVMe end-to-end data path that others just don't have.
That's right.
So you can support some of those really demanding use cases.
Demanding use cases where there's a huge amount of data or a mix of a lot of data that needs to be collected and stored in real time, and you can't drop a frame. That's mission critical information, and also a requirement for heavy duty processing. So we've really optimized our platform to be able to adapt to the customer's requirements and at the same time support multiple applications co-located on the same infrastructure and dynamically reprovision the resources as the use cases require. So a specific application that's mission critical requires resources to meet its SLAs. It will take the resources from the lower priority applications, the tier 3 apps. We'll move those resources to the tier 1 for the time it needs them, and then move them back once that's no longer required. So that kind of automation, we think, is the next generation of hyper-converged, where organizations are scaling to thousands of VMs on the same hyper-converged infrastructure and can't really afford the advanced IT skills to sit there and babysit those applications. They're looking for artificial intelligence, machine learning, automation to do that for them.
And that really goes back to, in fact, on the topic of artificial intelligence and machine learning, that's a pretty key use case for, and facial recognition and things like that.
Yep.
Those are all compute-intensive activities.
That's right.
That your architecture lends itself well to.
It does. In fact, we've rolled out entire platforms optimized for the really heavy analytics a lot of our customers are bringing us. I would say probably 50 or 60% of the use cases we see in security, surveillance, smart cities type of applications require video analytics. And video analytics might be facial recognition, it might be license plate recognition, it might be motion detection or loitering detection at points of ingress or egress. It might be matching specific attributes of a shape or an object in video frame, and then taking a huge amount of video and distilling that down to a shorter period by exception management. That takes a lot of processing power. So we've actually got platforms that are designed to support up to 6 GPUs just to ride along and support the processing requirements of those applications.
And on the business front, there's been a number of I would say, an evolution with Pivot3 over the last months, years. You have a new partnership with Lenovo.
Yeah. Exciting partnership with Lenovo. In fact, the SKUs went live this morning on their on-demand program. That is an OEM program from Lenovo that's pretty exciting for ISVs like us. They can very quickly spin up new product in an appliance mode manufactured in their factories. Lenovo is kind of unique. They're one of the few ODMs that actually owns their factories. And so they can be very agile and responsive to ISVs' needs and deliver product to market very quickly. So they can manufacture in China, they can manufacture in Hungary and in Mexico. So we're pretty excited about that. Those SKUs went live today. Those products run the gamut from our surveillance use cases, as we talked earlier, and also support those analytics use cases that we also talked about.
And I think when we talked last week, you said that the Lenovo deal expands your distribution channel by 400%.
It does. The Lenovo data center group has selling resources and technical resources around the world in places where Pivot3 simply doesn't have a presence. So this expands our capability in a lot of areas where we didn't previously have an office or sales coverage. That's good for our customers. We have a lot of customers in Asia Pac, for instance, or in the Middle East, or in countries in the southern South America region that now have coverage that they wouldn't have had otherwise. We provide first-line support on these solutions, so we continue to do that in partnership with Lenovo. We have access to their supply chain, so we can actually dispatch parts from their depots around the world. So it's a really nice symbiotic relationship with a big partner that can really support our needs.
And another partnership that's evolving is yours with AMD.
Yeah,
in fact, it might be safe to say that it's an epic partnership.
Yeah, right.
Tell us a little bit about what that's going to do and what that. I mean, it's pretty impressive what AMD is doing on the processor front these days, and you're leveraging that.
Well, this is the second generation of EPIC. It's called the codename Rome, I think. The platform specifically that we're certifying on is the 655 platform from Lenovo. This is an important partnership because we believe that, I mean, the chip market moves in major tectonic shifts, and this is one of the big shifts we believe that goes way beyond what some of the competitors are doing in terms of density and performance and throughput. These are single socket devices that we're certifying for that can hold up 20 drives, so there's good storage density for some of our really data intensive applications. You can put up to 6 GPUs on this platform. That's great for the analytics type work that we're doing, both in video and other big data analytics. This can be a large capacity drive. It can compete very effectively with some of the other form factors that we see in the marketplace. So probably one of the big things about this is a single socket platform, so it reduces your licensing cost for third-party applications. So this can have a real significant downstream impact for our customers. I saw some of the big ODMs at the EPIC launch talking about a reduction in cost of ownership by up to 45%. Now we haven't tested that internally, but even if it's directionally right, that is a significant tectonic shift in the economics for customers.
It is, and it really does enable hyperconvergence for the masses at those kind of price points. Also, when we talked last week, you talked about up and to the right. There's some good news there as well. Gartner, obviously.
Well, yeah. So we are sort of in the throes of doing the Gartner Magic Quadrant evaluations again this year. Last year, they characterized us as one of the I guess challenger, I guess, is the category. We're one of the 7 hyper-converged vendors that's above the ability to execute line, which is an important distinction because what that says is you are equipped to support the customers that you're selling to. And our customers don't buy for the short term. These are mission critical applications. They absolutely need a customer that can back up, or sorry, a partner that they can back up the solutions that they sell. And I think that's an indication that we have built a business that can do that. Because we target very intentionally the customers that we believe are a good fit for our solutions, we've instrumented the business to be able to support them and their specific needs. And then, of course, expanded with partnerships to be able to support that on a worldwide basis. So we believe being in the top 7 with some of the biggest brands in the world is testament to the business that we've built, the customer loyalty that we've engendered from our customer support. We believe that portends good things for us in the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And finally, you've refreshed your channel program over the last year as well.
Yeah, we're expanding the channel program, adding to it an additional level for some of our premier partners, the folks that really drive a lot of revenue, adding some specific incentives for that group to focus on the markets that we're intently focused on. We're structuring the MDF and the SPIF programs and so forth more intentionally for the various layers. So it's just a maturation of the program that you would expect in a company that's growing as fast as we are. 20% of the partners generate about 80% of the business, as you would expect. The Pareto principle applies here. So we are looking to make sure that we treat those partners appropriately with the right white glove service to make them as successful as they possibly can be. And that also extends to our partners' partners. So Lenovo has an entire channel, for instance. We want to make sure that they have a channel program where they can plan their business against the parameters of that channel program, and as a consequence, prefer working with Pivot3 over others.
Perfect. Bruce, thank you so much for joining us today.
Appreciate the time, Scott. Always fun.
And thank you for watching this interview. We'll be back in 3 minutes with our next interview. So Roger, can you give us a brief overview of what KnowBe4 does and why securing the human layer is so important?
So yeah, it's a great questions. And just starting with, KnowBe4 is the world's leading security awareness and training vendor. They've been around for about 7 years and just doing great in the industry in the world. But what it does, and the reason why I joined them, I'm relatively new, only joined a year or so ago. I was with Microsoft for 12, 15 years before that, and McAfee before that. But what they do is, essentially try to increase the security culture awareness within an organization. And specifically, they do that really well by doing a combination of simulated phishing campaigns against employees to find out who are the weak links or who can be tricked, followed by lots of training. We are literally like the Netflix of security awareness training. We have thousands of videos, we have games and posters, and some of our security awareness training even is like very Netflixy, meaning that we have these like 12 episode series that have spies and all kinds of intrigue and cool stuff in it. But overall, what we're trying to do is help organizations increase the overall computer security awareness of badness in their environment, and helping to regular end users to detect it and put it down. And the reason why it's so important is that survey after survey for at least the last 7 years has shown that phishing and social engineering is responsible for 70 to 90% of all malicious data breaches. 70 to 90%. I think the highest figure I've seen is 91%. But think about that. That means that one thing, we're told to be worried about all kinds of stuff, 16,000. So last year, there's over 16,555 new security vulnerabilities you're supposed to be worried about. Well, unpatched software and the security vulnerabilities, they only make up about 20 to 40% of malicious data breaches. But phishing and social engineering makes up, 70 to 90%. Whatever that percentage is, it changes each year. Whatever it is, it's always been the largest percentage. It used to be unpatched software and unpatched Oracle Java in particular, and Adobe Acrobat. Well, it's moved for the last 7 years because everybody's starting to patch better into social engineering and phishing. And so, KnowBe4, I think I joined them because they're kind of uniquely, present to be in the right field to stop most of that. When I was at Microsoft, I was doing all these really cool projects. I was securing Windows Vista, Windows 7, Windows 10, Active Directory. I was doing PKI and smart card projects, and I was doing all this advanced stuff. And I was doing really well. I was being recognized in my industry. I was doing a good job for my customers. But then I realized that those people were getting just as hacked after I left trying to secure them as they were before I was. And no matter what Microsoft put in their operating system, no matter how much more secure they made it, all the people are still getting infected and exploited, and almost always through social engineering. And I started to think, wow, I felt like I was wasting my life. And so I looked for a company that was doing a really good job in security awareness training and trying to stop that #1 main threat. And it ended up with KnowBe4, and I absolutely love it. Love the CEO, Stu, and the whole company. It's one of the funnest places in the world I've ever worked. And people like our software, and you have fun while you're trying to help people.
That's a good thing. I was actually on site at a KnowBe4 client earlier today. It's all over the place. So let's go to our next question. And I want to remind the audience that we really do want your questions. So please ask early and ask often so we can make sure we take your questions throughout the event. So one of the questions that we got from the audience, and this is word for word, is how can I train my users to not click on everything they see? It's a big problem. Roger, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, it's not an intelligence thing, right? I think a lot of us in IT think, I've even heard the term, end loser. We got these people that keep clicking, and people think it's an intelligence thing, but it's not. We've actually worked with different universities and continuing to work with some universities, working with the University of Central Florida right now, trying to track down the traits that make somebody more or less susceptible to social engineering and phishing. And one of the big early takeaways is it doesn't have anything to do with intelligence. You've got doctors, lawyers, PhDs, you've got Nobel Prize winners, that are susceptible to it, and not dumb people. But what we found out is that it mostly has to do with, are you aware of a particular type of scam? Are you skeptically thinking? So the people that get tricked more often, the people that are a little bit less, I guess for lack of a better word, less criminal themselves, and they don't have that
Hi there, I'm Scott Lowe again, and I am joined now by a couple of gentlemen from Nexsan. First of all, we have Mihir Shah, who is the CEO, and we have Surya Varanasi, who is the CTO of the company. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us in our studio today.
Scott,
Glad to
thank
be
you
here.
for having us.
So, there's, I've had a couple of briefings from you guys over the last few months, and there's been a lot of activity
Sure.
with you guys around Nexsan and around a lot of things.
Yep.
But tell us sort of what's happening around, Store-centric and Nexsan, Drobo, all Retrospect, Vexata, all this other stuff you've done, sort of at a high level.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll take it at the 30,000-foot level, and Surya can deep dive in any particular questions you might have in one of our brands. But Store-centric at the end of the day is really unifying exceptional storage technology that's out there, right? And we believe that there are fantastic products, fantastic brands in the marketplace that have been around for a while, that are stable, that work, and we like to call ourselves the best little secret in the storage industry, right? That nobody, Store-centric people haven't heard about it, but
Right.
people have heard about the brands. Our first foray into this was the acquisition of Drobo, which gets into the SMB space. The one after that was Nexsan, that got us into the enterprise-ish type space. And then we acquired a software company called Retrospect, which helps us on the backup side of it for SMBs and backing up into the cloud as well. And then Vexata was the recent acquisition, which gets us into the kind of the tip of the pyramid, right? All NVMe flash-based array that high-end enterprises like financial services companies use. And so we've been able, we now have the full spectrum from active data all the way up to archiving in our product set. We've grown at a compounded annual growth rate of 55% over the last 4 years, and the pace of acquisitions is increasing for us.
That's fantastic.
So we're excited. We have good product set, great team, and Surya now is the CTO of the whole business, and so I'll let him introduce himself as well.
Yeah, so thank you. So our portfolio, all the way from active data to archive. So, Vexata is about the tip of the spear, if you will. If time is money for you, you can get your, peak performance at the peak times is not good enough for you. You've tried everything else. You get a Vexata box, right? All flash, easy to plug in. We compete all the time. The Nexsan product line has the Unity and the E-Series, which is your high performance but not your absolutely critical workloads, block and file for general purpose use cases, scales all the way to 6 petabytes. Asurion, which is our active archive, really think of it as Druva or Cohesity backup. We've been doing this for 15 years, seamlessly plugs in. And of course, Drobo and Retrospect together give us our home office, SMB, and backup into the cloud. Think QNAP and so on for that.
I actually had a Drobo array for a while, and back in the 90s, I was a Retrospect customer. So these things are near and dear, sort of, or good memories, and they were great products. And it's great to hear that they're getting a new lease on life with your company. So, what's the long-term strategy around this? Like, what are you planning to bring them together more? Are they going to stay separate products, or is there going to be like an overarching data fabric? How does that strategy look long-term?
Yeah, so we do want to take the enterprise product line, so the Nexsan product line with the Unity, the E-Series, the Asurion, and Vexata, and tighten the integration with them. So that's the first piece of it. The second piece of it is, as I mentioned, Asurion has existed for quite a while. We do a lot of backup on-prem. We want to take that to the cloud. So in fact, we have one-stop shop for not only your active data, but being able to back up into the cloud and protect your data and meet all the requirements like GDPR.
So tell me more about what your plans are with Retrospect.
So Retrospect is our cloud backup. So first aspect of it is tight integration with Drobo. So people can buy that, and not only do you get your local site, if you will, that's really fast, you can back that up into the cloud. We want to take that upstream because we already have cloud backup with Retrospect, and see how we can actually help companies migrate even on the small side of the enterprise.
Very good. And you also just formed a partnership between Vexata and Robin.io, correct?
Yeah.
Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure.
Yeah, so this again is a commitment for customers. Hybrid cloud is the way to go. And Robin.io with us gives us a way for customers to take their workload, put it on Robin.io, and guarantee that their workload can now move seamlessly to the cloud and back, the cloud of your choice. That's part of what we want to do.
Very good. And I know that there's probably a lot of things in the pipeline, but what's next?
Yeah, I mean, everybody wants to know what's next. And, the way that we view the world, between these four companies that we acquired, we got 1 million customers.
Really?
So we take a very, our worldview is how can we help those customers address the storage challenges, that they're facing. And so, we talk to customers. Hey, what are you looking at next? What do you guys think about this? What do you guys think about that? Gives us validation for the market. It's difficult to create a product from the ground up and then try to get a product market fit for it. Our view is a little bit different. Let's talk to the customer. We know that there's good technology out there that's been developed, that's stable, and then let's go fit that into the quilt that we're building over here. That's kind of our view.
And it's a great methodology, in my opinion. It's just because there are so many. The landscape is insane.
Yep.
Of companies that are storage, security, whatever vertical you want to look at. And there's so many that are just either not going to be profitable or that are not struggling, but just kind of churning.
Yep.
And so it seems like that's a great opportunity for companies like you to be able to give them, again, a new lease on life.
Yeah, and again, it's the toughest part in this industry is to build that channel. And we were fortunate enough with the acquisition of Drobo and Nexan to get that channel. Right. And now, what can we push through that channel? Because they're comfortable with us, right? For example, the Nexan or the Vexata play was really interesting. The customers started asking us, "What's your NVMe story?" We didn't have one.
Right.
Right. And to go build an NVMe company from the ground up, well, we know how the ones that are public are doing. They're not making any money.
Right.
Right. So how can we? And the most expensive part is to build that channel. We have it. Right. And we got that benefit through, like I said, the investment that Nexan and Drobo made in the channel. Now it's like we have a seat at the table. We'll go to the customer and say, hey, we're already installed from a Nexan standpoint. Here's our NVMe story. And it seems to work. We're getting in there, we're getting in front of customers, and we're excited. We really are.
So from a customer perspective, these have been pretty seamless transitions for them.
Seamless, absolutely seamless.
That's good.
They just know the trusted brand. They know it. They know it works. They know the stability of it. And Surya gets on the plane. Tells them the architecture, here's where, and they love it because we don't hold them hostage. That's another thing. The incumbents are going in. What happens, right? They got to meet their quarterly targets. The maintenance contracts expire. If you don't buy a new piece of hardware, I'm going to jack your price up 1,000% on maintenance. So you're forced to go do a storage, forklift upgrade.
Right.
And that's disruptive.
Highly.
All right. And so we go in there and say, we'll never do that to you. And we go back to the name store-centric, storage-focused, customer-centric, right? We're going to make sure we do right by the customer.
And you've got, like you said, the whole line now.
Yeah.
So as customers grow, they can grow with you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you have a migration plan to get them from Drobo to Nexan to Vexata, or is that something that's in the works?
I think that's part of the plan. Today they're brands are separate, but we want to actually make that move seamless. So that's probably the reason why we got things like retrospect, because we can easily migrate data from one place to another. How do we extend that and tie it all together? That's what's next.
So let's go back to retrospect for a second. So have customers seen new opportunities since the acquisition now with retrospect?
Yeah, actually they have. In fact, what we've actually pitched it is taken the retrospect product a little bit upstream. So what used to be that you just take it for your home, your Mac, you'll then go back it up, and we said, hey, no, in fact, we can go to the enterprise, and if you have a bunch of servers that are not protected at all, deploy retrospect and back it up into your cloud. And so we've actually taken it upstream a little.
Very good.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for dropping by.
Yeah, thank you for your time, Scott.
And thank you to our audience
you
for watching. We'll be back in 3 minutes with our next interview.
Healthy skepticism that they should. Like, they don't know that Microsoft doesn't proactively call you to tell you your computer's infected and offer to help you out. In the real world, us IT people know that not only does Microsoft not proactively call, but if you were to find the right number on the internet somehow, call Microsoft with a credit card and offer them $200, you'd still be having a hard time getting help, right? I mean, that's the reality. Or that the IRS doesn't want you to pay the IRS debt off in gift cards and Bitcoin, and if you don't know about CEO fraud, maybe when the CEO sends you an email going, hey, I need you to get a bunch of gift cards together, or, send this check here. Or if you don't know about mortgage wire transfer fraud, or if you don't know, there's so many things that, if you don't know that, the Craigslist person that's going to buy your product is offering to give you full price plus pay shipping, and all you have to do is use their safe escrow agent. So the idea about security awareness training is exactly that. We're trying to make the culture of the organization more skeptical against social engineering and phishing attacks by making them see and be, understanding the types of things they may see, making them aware of these types of tricks. Because once you become aware that Microsoft doesn't proactively call, you're much more likely to figure out that that's a scam call when it comes to you, or the CEO trying to pressure you with a stressor event to send gift cards to pay for Christmas, or the HR department supposedly asking you for updated W-2 information. If you don't know about these popular scams, you're not aware of them, you're a little bit more likely to be susceptible to them. And one of the things I like to tell people is don't let the hacker and the phisher be the first time you've tested your employees about whether or not they're aware of a particular type of phishing campaign.
One of the things for the audience, I did put a poll question up that asks you, how worried are you about human security in your organization? I'm going to leave that poll question up while we chat a little bit more. Roger, I think I'm going to go back to one of the points you just mentioned, which was intelligence level. I was spent a lot of years as a CIO, and I got, as a new CIO in one organization, the IT staff was less than kind about how they refer to users. And I heard the term end losers and, things like that. And I put a pretty quick stop to it. And the idea that people are stupid or not. And we're back with our next interview. We are joined by the founder and CEO of Render, Anurag Goel. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us what Render is all about.
Sure. So Render is the easiest way to deploy any application or website on the cloud. And we compete with existing cloud providers and differentiate ourselves based on ease of use and just how easy we make it for developers and consultants and startups to just get their apps up and running. Effectively, all they have to do is push to GitHub and we take care of the rest. But it's not just ease of use, we also focus on flexibility and power. And giving them the features that they need, like private networks and persistent storage, without them having to manage any of that.
Yeah, one of the big challenges for people, especially smaller organizations, is the whole complexity of the application development or even the website development process,
Absolutely.
like you said. And especially when you start putting in, I would say, newer or not new technologies like Kubernetes and containers and things like that, which people want to build modern apps on, there's a heavy lift.
Yes.
There's a lot of friction there.
There is a lot of desire to use new technologies like Kubernetes because it's hyped and everyone wants to use the new shiny thing. But my take on that is for most smaller organizations, they don't need Kubernetes. And even if they decide to use Kubernetes, it's a huge time sink, both in terms of getting set up and in terms of day two operations and making sure that you're able to stay up to date with everything that's changing in the ecosystem.
So from a Render's perspective, is that Kubernetes is really a step too far for a lot of organizations?
Yes. So Render right now runs on top of Kubernetes, but that's incidental. We don't expose it to the end user, but we expose all the best features of Kubernetes, and then we add all the other things that organizations have to build on top, like logging, monitoring, persistent databases, and DNS, service discovery, all of that. We take care of essentially managing a hosted Kubernetes for you where you don't even know that you're working with Kubernetes. So you don't need to understand any of the Kubernetes stuff. All you need to understand is your code and how that builds and how you want to scale it.
And how, as a developer, how do I interface with Render? What's the...
The interface is just your code. Again, you can just push your code to GitHub and GitLab and go to Render, click on a button that says, I want to create a new web service. And it connects to GitHub, pulls the code directly from there, builds it, deploys it, gives you a URL. So all of that happens within the span of a couple of minutes, and you have a working app up and running.
Now, I understand there's been a recent focus on the user experience and scale, and with scale platforms. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I think that as we see more and more players enter the public cloud market, it's actually becoming harder for developers to pick the right solution and then also to deploy applications in the cloud. This is something that I experienced personally as I was building a lot of different applications that I tried to deploy online with existing providers like AWS or Google Cloud. And with each of them, there was always a specific set of steps that I had to go through. It was tedious. It was always a chore, and that's what prompted me to build Render in the first place, to take all of that away. So all the little things like, hey, if my server goes down, I should be able to just restart it automatically, or I want to be able to specify a health check, or I want to see all the logs and metrics in one place.
Very good.
Yeah, so all of that is taken care of by Render, and we're still working towards making the platform even easier to use. And so the ease of use aspect is, like I said in the beginning, is what differentiates us. And we're seeing people respond really well to that. We're seeing people move over from AWS and even move over from their own managed Kubernetes clusters to Render.
How do you decide how you're going to move forward with new features and things like that?
So a lot of it is just, as developers, we have a really keen understanding of what developers want, but we also have public feature request boards where people can chime in to tell us what they want. And then we have a public chat room where people can come in not just for support, but just to give us feedback on what's going on. And we're always engaging with our users to try to make sure that we're building the best thing for them.
Very good. And one of the things that we wanted to make sure we got out was basically you're growing, but you're growing rapidly and very organically.
Yes. So we launched just about 4 months ago, and then we haven't really spent any money on marketing, and we don't even have the time to actually do marketing, given that we're focusing entirely on the product and on growing our team. But all our growth so far has been through word of mouth, and on average, our revenue has increased 50% month over month over the last 4 months, and we continue to see that accelerate.
And I'm not sure if you're able to say, but how many people are using the platform now?
It's in the thousands.
That's fantastic for 4 months.
Yeah,
that must be pretty gratifying.
It is, yes, and it's not just the numbers themselves, but it's also when people come and tell you, hey, I'm so glad that Render exists, because I would not have been able to do this thing with any other cloud. So for example, just 2 days ago, one of our users who I've been talking to off and on told me, if Render did not have private networking, I would just not have set the service up because it would be too hard on AWS.
Very good. Well, that's a fantastic testimonial.
Absolutely, yeah.
So without naming names, what are some of the coolest projects you've seen some of your customers undertake with the platform?
So Render at this point is a very flexible platform. So we have people deploying everything from WordPress to Elasticsearch and RabbitMQ, and they're building projects that end up scaling massively and making tons of connections, like hundreds of thousands of connections to certain servers to try and gather and analyze data. So we're seeing a lot of those apps. I think the challenge for us going forward is to make sure that the platform continues to scale and be reliable as more and more people get on board, and then also to scale it out geographically. So right now, most of our compute is in the US, and one of the biggest demands we have right now is to open up regions in Europe and in Asia. So that's on our list to do within the next few months.
And what's your licensing model?
It's fairly simple pricing. We price based on the compute or memory plan that you want for your server. Actually, static sites, which are just plain HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, they're all free for now. And that's sort of our free tier.
Right.
But for compute, we start off at really simple $7 a month, and it goes up to about $250 a month, depending on how much compute you want. And then we also have separate pricing for bandwidth and persistent storage.
And as you continue to grow and build the product to scale more, I assume you'll have higher tier plans for bigger applications?
Yes, absolutely. And even today, we can create custom plans for people as they need them. And we have the ability to scale both horizontally and vertically even today by just just like clicking a button, and it spins up a new instance of your app pretty easily without any downtime.
And did you say you're in the process of opening up EU and things like that?
Yes, that is on our near-term roadmap.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I assume you're doing that coupled with data sovereignty, GDPR, things like that probably help drive some of those decisions as well? Or just is it data locality more than anything?
I think it's data locality for a lot of people. So they want to make sure that, so for example, one of the biggest recipe sites in Italy is one of our users.
Really?
Yeah, and right now their data is all being served from the US, but obviously they would want it to be served from somewhere closer to their primary user base.
Yeah, and I've assumed a lot of that's for latency reasons, and partially it's probably want to keep things in the country.
Yeah, that is also true.
What is beyond growing geographically and things like that? What are some of the other things you're trying to add to the product to make it even more usable for your customers?
Sure. So one of the recent additions that we're still improving is the ability to create all your infrastructure with code, and that's absolutely necessary as you build out larger apps.
Yeah.
So we have now a render.yaml format where you can just specify all your services, how they connect to each other, which is kind of a replacement for 5 different Kubernetes YAML files or 2 or 3 Docker compose files, and it's specific to render. And from what I've seen, a lot of people in a lot of larger organizations like GitHub, for example, end up building something similar on top of their Kubernetes clusters. And this is something that we see over and over again, where people build a poor approximation of render on top of Kubernetes so that developers can get the experience that they want. And render is all about doing it once and really well for everyone.
And it sounds like it's probably pretty sticky, especially at the kind of pricing you're talking about. It's
Yeah, so given that our current market is developers and consulting firms and startups, they are price conscious, and we make sure that we're not gouging them. So for example, if you look at a platform like Heroku, to get 2.5 gigs of RAM, you have to pay $250 per month, which is just insane, I think. And with render, it's an order of magnitude less.
That's fantastic for those folks.
Yes, absolutely.
And are you looking eventually at an enterprise platform
Eventually,
as well?
yes. So our current focus and our focus for the next maybe year at least is going to continue to be developers and startups and smaller teams. When it comes to the enterprise, we have a lot of things that we want to add to the product before we start focusing on the enterprise. But people are already asking us, there are people who are running tens of services on Azure and they want to move to render, and they want things that we haven't built yet. So I think that we'll be ready for certain enterprise users within 6 months or to a year. But our current focus, and for the foreseeable future, our focus is going to continue to be developers and startups.
I don't know, congratulations on the great success
Thank
after
you.
just 4 months, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
It's much appreciated. And thank you for watching. We'll be back in 3 minutes with our next interview. All right, let's go on to the next question. We got quite a few questions, so I want to make sure we get through them. So this is really 2 ways to ask the same question. We had 2 people ask it, and I wanted to ask it both ways. One is, how can I instill a culture of strict security enforcement without being too intrusive? Or how do you create a security environment that is welcoming but firm to employees? And this is an interesting balancing act. the security people really have to be thinking about. What are your thoughts, and what are KnowBe4's thoughts on this question?
So, we look, trying to create a security culture is like kind of getting an infant or a toddler to look both ways before crossing the street, right? You just try to teach it and you make it a normal part of their lives, the education to be aware of looking right and left for cars before you cross the street, so that it becomes a natural part of the behavior. We certainly, our big thing, what we've seen the best success for customers is that they first figure out a baseline of how phishable people are in their environment. So they send out some type of general phish that nobody should fall for, but so it's not very crafty. It looks like a phish. And what they're going to usually find out is somewhere between 25 to 40% of their end user base is susceptible to phishing. And then start giving them education. Give them, every time if someone gets hired, you give them a longer, 30, 45-minute broader video and training that's on, phishing and all the different types. And then, you test them once a quarter, once a month or whatever. You send them a simulated phishing email. And if they fail, you want to give them immediate feedback of, hey, this is a phish test. Here are the things you should have seen that would have told you that it was a phishing test, and then you send them, you can send them training then, or you send little, it could be little videos or little outlines. You literally want to create a culture of security awareness, and you want to make them aware that they're not going to get in trouble if they get phished. Like, hey, I think I got phished. I need to report that to the help desk or incident response team. You need to let them know that we're all in this together, and you're consistent. What you don't want to do, a lot of companies give 5 minutes to 30 minutes of security awareness training once a year. There is not a lot of value in that. You want to provide it more often than that. You want to make it a part of the environment. You want to, try to make it fun. Try to make it a game. Tell people, we believe in more carrot and less stick these days, and so that.
After 4 long years, I'm happy to be reacquainted with Pujan Kumar, who is now the CEO and co-founder of Clumio. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Scott. Nice meeting you.
So tell us, what is Clumio?
So Clumio is a 2-year-old company, got started in late 2017. So we've been in stealth up until a couple of weeks ago, really going and taking advantage of the fact that there is a big transition that's happening from on-premises to the public cloud, and basically going and building a platform on top of the public cloud to take advantage of the transition.
Very good. And so what is your elevator pitch when customers call you up and say, what would you say you do here? What's your elevator pitch to them about what Clumio helps them solve?
Absolutely. So we have basically launched a backup as a service, enterprise backup as a service offering running on top of the public cloud. And fundamentally, if you look at any enterprise today, they have data on premises, they have data in applications running in the public cloud, and they have data in other SaaS applications. And so our vision has been to really build, a very simple, enterprise backup as a service offering to go and really, protect, data sources irrespective of where they belong.
What would you say is the general solution landscape around data protection right now that you felt a need to start a new company to help address these issues?
Absolutely. I think if you look at data protection, it's a huge market. It has a bunch of vendors starting off from really legacy vendors, and the space has seen some really good action in the last few years, right? Fundamentally, we picked this space because there is a convergence happening between data protection and data management at the end of the day, and like any other use case, if you look at what's happening overall in the industry, like where in data warehousing you went from buying software and hardware to integrated appliances to now using something like a Snowflake running in the public cloud. Every sector, every use case is getting SaaSified fundamentally, right? being delivered as as a simple SaaS service, and more the current generation of SaaS companies are built on the public cloud. So we saw that as a big opportunity where data protection, specifically starting off with on-premises use case, is still very infrastructure centric.
Right.
And today, if you look at where we are in 2019, as I said, data firstly is not just on-premises; it's everywhere. But more importantly, I think nobody really wants to go and buy infrastructure to go and solve backup and data protection fundamentally. So we said, okay, this is a big void it's in the market, and obviously it extends as people move their applications to the public cloud also. And we figured that, okay, if somebody could truly deliver a real service, a SaaS service, running in the cloud, and deliver it for all of these use cases, people would love to embrace it as versus going and really buying infrastructure in the current day and age to really get backup for their workloads, so to speak.
So you're a cloud-based SaaS service that people consume, and they can back up on-premises workloads into the cloud using Clumio.
Yeah. So the starting point today, the service that's live, for the last 4 months now, we have customers using the service, is basically a simple service that backs up on-premises VMware environments as well as VMC, with this SaaS service running in the public cloud on top of AWS initially. But that's the first use case with which we have launched. As you fast forward in time, you'll see us go and attack more and more data sources. Even beyond virtualization, you'll see us go and tackle some public cloud native use cases, because as customers are moving their apps in the public cloud, this is again needed, right? Even for applications in the public cloud. But what's live today does on-prem VMware and VMware on AWS.
So, one of the things you mentioned was people don't want to go buy a bunch of hardware to do data protection anymore. But what else would you say is lacking in the current backup space that that people need to be looking at as something like a Clumio to help them address?
Yeah. So it depends on where somebody is in their journey to the public cloud, right? For folks who haven't started their journey yet and really want to figure out use cases to move to the public cloud, turns out this is a phenomenal use case to get started to move to the public cloud, right? In 2019, people want to do things that add fundamental business value to their organization that they're working on, and they don't want to be in the business of upgrading, installing, looking at infrastructure and figuring out how much storage I need, and if I get it wrong,
Right.
buy more of these blocks and so on and so forth, right? So fundamentally, just giving freedom to our end users and saying, okay, focus on what can add business value, and like you left CRM and left email to somebody else to deliver a service, move this back office function fundamentally to a service that's running in the cloud. So that is the big driver for folks who haven't embraced the public cloud yet. For folks who are already in somewhere in their hybrid journey, right? They are looking at a single solution, a single service to fundamentally go and deliver data protection, irrespective of where the data belongs. And especially for apps that are built in the public cloud, if you look at it, right, a legacy solution will force a customer to go and take the piece of software, run it across accounts, across regions in the
Right.
public cloud, and that does not scale. Not only does it not scale, it goes against the fundamental reason you went to the cloud in the first place, right? And so, any vendor that's already in the cloud is looking for that simple service offering, like how VMC is, right? Service offering that essentially solves this thing for them across regions, across accounts, and that's what we are going to deliver for the public cloud.
So does Clumio protect primarily virtualized workloads, or is bare metal workloads as well?
Today it's virtualized workloads.
So you install on the host?
No, the way the architecture is built is, you get a virtual appliance from us, right? So basically you go to clumio.com, you log in, you register for the service. You get a virtual appliance that you download in your on-premises vCenter or on VMC. And this virtual appliance, just as soon as you power it on, it connects to the service in the cloud. So this is end-to-end managed by us. It's a stateless virtual appliance that connects to the cloud service. It essentially pushes the inventory. You set up policies on the clumio.com interface, and basically that's it, right? And so it's an end-to-end service offering that we deliver that essentially requires no management from the customer.
That's fantastic. So it's that simple to set up, basically.
Absolutely, right. By this time in the interview, if you were a customer, you would essentially start protecting your environment, and you wouldn't need to do much. And the other beauty about SaaS service like us is, every week we upgrade the service. So the service that was, what you bought 4 months ago versus today, it has a bunch of new features. You log in, you see those new features, and you start using them.
So is there, from a directional standpoint, do you ultimately expect you'll cover physical workloads, or is that not really in the roadmap? And I assume cloud workloads at some point will come into the equation as well. I mean, 365, even Salesforce, things like that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think as you see us, at reInvent this year, later this year, you'll start seeing how we'll go way beyond VMware and really go and start doing cloud native workloads, starting with AWS, and then you want to do Azure, you want to do GCP. So it's fundamentally like Pat mentioned in his keynote, it's going to be a multi-cloud platform. We have built it to be multi-cloud and really go and protect any data source anywhere. We'll go after SaaS sources like O365 and Salesforce and many others, right? So single platform, single service that will deliver all of that, and at some point we'll go even beyond that.
And as I'm deploying this, how granular can I get with retention and things like that? Can I set specific policies for specific VMs? How does that kind of stuff work?
Everything, right? If you look at our solution, it's pretty complete from really granular policies at the VM level, at your folder level, cluster level, tag level, you name it, right? We have all of that baked into the service. We have enterprise features around encryption, key management, bandwidth throttling. If you really want to control how much bandwidth we use and things like that. We have restore capabilities around full VM restore, a Google-like search where you can search for files within the VM, because we obviously harness the power of the public cloud. We are able to index all the data that we are backing up, right, and really give you search capability so that you can restore at a per file level. All of that is baked into the platform already.
So if I'm someone who wants to learn more about Clumio, is there a trial? How does that kind of stuff work?
Yeah, actually, obviously while we're in the conference right now, we're giving away a 30-day free trial, right? Somebody can just essentially start using this unlimited for 30 days, and really that's what we have seen. We have tens of POCs that are happening just in the last few weeks since we have gone GA. People just love the simplicity of it, and once they start using it, they absolutely want to get rid of whatever they have and move to the service.
Very good. Pujan, thank you so much for coming by.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Thanks for the time.
And thank you to our audience for watching. We'll be back in a few minutes with our next interview. Next question. What are some of the worst social engineering outcomes you've seen? This was a question right from the audience. Like, tell us the horror story that keeps you awake at night or makes you laugh. I don't know, either way.
Well, I mean, I guess it's, the ones, they're actually pretty common. The worst social engineering outcomes is people that say, hey, we can't train our employees, our boss, or somebody won't let us, send these simulated phishing emails, and because someone got mad or somebody phished the CEO 2 years ago and didn't tell the CEO what was going on, and so they're not allowed to push these training and simulated phishing campaigns to people. And that used to be like the norm. Today it's the rare company that can't send them, but I still see people that can't send them, and they are getting successfully phished. And of course, it's the ransomware stuff, right? I mean, it's where the entire companies, entire hospitals, they get social engineered to running ransomware, and their company is shut down for days to weeks. I was just talking to the FBI yesterday, and they told me they had one FBI client that got ransomware. They got social engineered and running ransomware. It locked up all the company's computers, and they paid $1.6 million to get the ransomware key to unlock the computers. They actually had backups, but they realized by the time they got through doing all the data restores that it was going to cost them more in consulting time and downtime and revenue than to pay the $1.6 million. They paid the $1.6 million, and the ransomware key that they were sent did not unlock their data. So now they're trying to negotiate with a ransomware creator, going, "Hey, your encryption key did not unlock it. Can you help us?" And I don't know. I do not know whether or not they are successful in getting their data unlocked. But they paid $1.6 million, and it didn't unlock their data.
That's unfortunate. There's probably not a money-back guarantee with those things.
Yeah. You hope there's honor among thieves, but I wouldn't. The FBI says you shouldn't pay the ransom, but somewhere on the team, somebody for that company said, no, we got to pay it. We got to pay it. Everybody agree, and then when it didn't work, that has to be an uncomfortable conversation to take back to the CEO.
I would agree with that. So here's another one. How do I keep people from sharing passwords to secure resources? We see this all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, certainly education is the way that you start, but I tell you something I do a lot is I tell people to take one of those password, programs or queries that will go out on the internet and the dark web and find out how many times their existing login names and passwords have been shared. I think, the free one that a lot of people know is Have I Been Pwned? If you go, haveibeenpwned.com or whatever by Troy Hunt, that was one of the first ones anyone ever heard about. But it's that's a good one. But at KnowBe4, if you go to knowbe4.com/resources, we have tools that will do it for you, and they're more inclusive. So they will go out again and find either your personal login name and passwords, or they'll do it for your entire organization if that's what you wanted to do. And I think people are very surprised because on average, I think people have 8 login names and passwords that are compromised out there on the internet. And I even run a password manager now, and it checks all the time to see. I've got hundreds of websites in my password manager, and I'm surprised by how often one of those websites will get compromised, and I'm not reading about it in the media, right? It's just my password management tool is like, hey, that login name and password got compromised. You need to go change it. And then days or weeks later, the
And we're back, and I'm joined by Mark Crevier, who is the Principal Systems Engineer for US Signal. Mark, thank you for coming by the studio today.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little about what US Signal is before we get started.
US Signal is a holistic IT service provider in the West Michigan area, Grand Rapids, Michigan. Provide a full stack of services from network connectivity, co-location, cloud services, infrastructure as a service, backup as a service, DR as a service, and reaching more into the security space as well.
Are you primarily focused on that region, or are you a national footprint?
More of the region, the area surrounding the Great Lakes region.
Okay. So you've had some announcements recently. One is a new DRaaS offering for VMware. Do you want to talk a little bit to us about what that looks like and what that means for your customers?
Yeah, that one's near and dear to my heart. We're one of 8 service providers, premier cloud service providers for VMware that are included in the cloud or the DRaaS powered initiative, and that's based on vCloud availability. It's a technology utilizing native vSphere replication technologies, so it's real simple to get installed and configured, and it replicates to our vCloud Director offering, so our cloud. And real simple to set up, and it's gives customers an opportunity to do some self-service DRaaS to us to recover into our cloud in the event they have a disaster, or if they just want to spin something up for testing and upgrade. But super simple setup, down to 5-minute RPOs for a really incredibly reasonable cost.
And speaking of DRaaS and low RPOs and RTOs and all that good stuff, you also have an enhanced Zerto-based DRaaS offering that you've been working on as well.
We do, yeah. For those workloads that need that really low RPO and RTO, we have Zerto, and they can be layered together. So I think we anticipate a lot of customers having that need where they've got their tier 1 applications that they really want that low RTO, and then vCloud availability for the higher. And yeah, some of the new stuff we're doing with Zerto is enabled multi-cloud, so you can replicate to multiple sites. So a couple use cases for that could be if you want to replicate to one of your own secondary sites and use us as a tertiary site, or replicate to multiple clouds if you want that level of diversity.
And what does that mean for your customers? Like, how do they consume this? They just call you up and you can do it for them?
Yeah, call us up. We have professional services that can help as much as needed with these. A lot of this is now self-managed. We get them the customer provisioned in our system and turn them loose. The customers are now able to use their own enterprise licensing for Zerto, which is a new change with the self-managed option. So we anticipate that being popular.
And you guys just did a survey on distributed denial of service, I believe.
Yeah, yep.
What were some of the high-level, that's really interesting. I know that's a little bit of a departure from what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
But what are some of the high-level things that surprised you when you got those results?
Well, we had a combined 3 out of 4 respondents indicated that distributed denial of service and ransomware, between those two, indicated their highest level of concern. And that a lot of these had distributed denial of service. Most had distributed denial of service, and over half had multiple distributed denial of service attacks against their organization. So some of these offerings that we've got, to protect against these bad actors, right? That's what we're looking out for. Help with that. So we've got not only the DR and business continuity planning and assistance with that, but some web application firewall capabilities as well.
So basically, some of the things that came out from your survey, you're able to address with some of the things we just talked about with the VMware and Zerto and some of the web application firewall things that you've got out there. So I was bringing the survey up on the screen to make sure that I had it in front of me, and you had 101 IT decision makers and companies with at least 750 employees, and this was just done in June, so it's fresh data.
Yeah.
And it's pretty alarming, some of the data. Especially when you start thinking about, the importance of the DRaaS offerings you have in place now. A third of respondents say ransomware attacks are the most prevalent threat to their organization.
Yeah.
When you talk to customers, how concerned are they about ransomware, and have they suffered?
Oh, extremely, yeah. I think also in that survey indicates that the average monetary loss was over $150,000. So if that's the average, you've got some that maybe they got out okay, but that means that there are some that paid significantly more than that to recover from that, if they were able to recover. So yeah, it's definitely surprising how prevalent it is out there, and a little worrisome how unprepared either these companies are or feel they are, right?
Right.
And we can help with a lot of that. Not only we don't just sell these products. We support them. We've got a team of experts versed in DR that have done the testing. I think that for these customers, having done that test, knowing that you've got a plan in place, just helps them sleep better at night.
Well, yeah, especially when you look at what's happening in the news. I mean, what was it? 21 departments in Texas, local governments in Texas, got hit by ransomware last week, a week before, and they weren't ready.
Yeah.
Atlanta got hit, Baltimore got hit. All of these big organizations that you really want your data protected are getting hit and paying ransoms.
Yeah, I mean, and it's it's not just protection; it's training. It's having the protection in place up front, but also having a response plan. In the eventuality that does happen.
And these attacks aren't just things are problematic now, but you're down for a long time. I mean, your survey says that on average, people say they're down 12 hours because of a DDoS attack.
Yeah.
And that 12 hours, when you start to multiply that by revenue amounts and expense amounts, starts to add up really quickly. You said $150,000 is the average cost.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing for me was 8% said they have experienced 21 to 30 hours of downtime due to an attack.
Yeah, I can't imagine enterprise being down that long and the calls I would be getting.
Probably a few.
Yeah.
So when a customer contacts you, are they contacting you because they're afraid of their security posture and they really need help? I guess what I'm asking is, what kind of expertise are you seeing in organizations around security, and do they really have? They're all smart people, don't get me wrong, but do they really have the time or the skills to be able to do this themselves?
Some do, some don't, and that's why we offer a range of managed and unmanaged, so that if you've got the expertise and you've got that comfort level, and you want to control all aspects of this, we'll set you up with the tools you need to get it done, so that you don't need to have big capital expenditure. Right? This is all OpEx kind of stuff. Makes it real easy to consume. But if you're not sure, what you don't know, that's where our services team can really jump in. And even after the fact, once you're set up, whether it's managed or unmanaged, one of the things we're able to provide, as opposed to a lot of other providers, is we own the entire stack in a lot of these cases. The network, the recovery options, the the data centers. So it's one phone call, right? Our technical operations center, staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, based right in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So you don't get that kind of vendor battle that I think a lot of people watching may have experienced, where you've got to make 4 or 5 phone calls to get a complete solution.
And that's one of the, I mean, as we look at this whole fractured vendor landscape that we see out there today, I used to be a CIO, and it was a smaller landscape at that point, and it was frustrating watching vendor finger pointing go on at that point.
Yeah.
And having a partner in the middle was always incredibly helpful, and I can't imagine how much worse it's gotten today, and how much more necessary companies like US Signal are to help that truly understand all the various technologies, how they work together, and how to navigate the maze.
You hear the term trusted partner thrown around a lot, and I think that it's not always embodied, but I think that what we're able to offer, I think, is the embodiment of that phrase, as being a true trusted partner, and really working with our customers on these things.
I've actually written articles about the concept of the trusted partner, and it's, like you said, everybody wants to be that, but it sounds like you're actually walking the walk.
I think so, yeah. I mean, I like to believe our customers would tell you the same thing.
So what else do you do beyond security? I mean, obviously we talked about drafts, we talked about some of this survey, but what else does US Signal do for your customers?
Well, like I said, we've got a very prominent, wholly owned and operated fiber optic footprint throughout that service area. We have 8, soon to be 9, data center locations. We're actually going to have a brand new purpose-built co-location facility in the Detroit metro area. Purpose-built, so it's we knew from day one, what makes a good data center, and are building it for that purpose. So it does make a difference. We're not retrofitting power pads, network pads. It's all in there from day one. And then lots of backup as a service. So that we've got there are a fair number of people out there that feel that backup is DR.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, so we definitely advocate having both the replication type technology and backup and recovery for those more granular operations.
So I'm sure you find yourself doing a lot of customer education about where they need a Veeam, or where they need a Zerto, and where they need a VMware, and all this other good stuff.
Yeah, and they all have their place. Yeah, we also have a Veeam replication, cloud replication for Veeam based on the Veeam platform, so that we can participate in that ecosystem. And it comes back to the same multi-tenant infrastructure, where we have the compute on hand, and it's an OpEx based on that as well.
Very good. Yeah. Mark, this was great. Thank you for coming by.
Pleasure to be here.
And we'll be back in just a few minutes with our next interview.
News article comes out saying that it was compromised. So I'd say show them how their current stuff could be compromised already, and say you need to stop using identical passwords between different unknown sites.
We have a question from the audience that's live. So the question is, based on your experience and KnowBe4's experience, which industry or which departments, such as HR, accounting, IT, operations, marketing, etc., within a company has failed most spectacularly, or which ones are the most common areas of concern, I guess?
So I would say that it changes. It changes all the time, over time. I mean, industry-wise, it changes all the time. We certainly see increase, focus on finance and banking and stuff like that, because the bad guys are trying to get money. But that always changes, depending. Sometimes it's it's financial, sometimes it's lawyers, sometimes it's regular companies. But department wise, we certainly see some intrigue. Not surprisingly, the C-level people are far more phishable usually than the average employee. And then things we like to say is things like, let's say IT is not necessarily more phishable than the average employee, but there's a lot more risk, meaning that just because somebody's phishable or the department's more phishable statistically, it may maybe they're not as risky. Like, who cares if they're phishing, or who cares as much if they're phishing your cafeteria worker, a janitorial worker? What you want to do is be worried about how successful they might be, in your finance department, in your C-level department, in your IT department, in your, all the critical stuff. And like some people worry about, hey, we don't want to have people that are, domain admins or local admins compromised. I try to tell people that, many times those are only your network elevated accounts. You want to be careful to try to protect the risk against people that are like your Salesforce admins or, your application admins or people that have access to critical data, because all it does is take one employee to start that program. The next thing you know, you're Sony with your entire email system out there on the internet.
All right, let's go to our next question. So what steps can I take to make sure my users maintain awareness of, really evolving compliance requirements?
Well, certainly I think it all starts with whenever they're hired, they should review and sign, acceptable use policy. It tells them what they can and can't do, or what they should or shouldn't be doing on a computer. But it should also include training to tell them what the compliance is, what they, how big their password, has to be, when they have to change it, what the account lockout policy is, and, so on and so on. So I think, you certainly have to make it when they're hired, and then annually they should review those things. Always make it aware, and available on the internet or on their intranet so they can review it when they need to. But also you can make it a part of their training. Security, many people customers we have are like, hey, can we upload our training into your platform? And you can. You can make your own video that has all of your compliance requirements in it, upload it to our platform, and ship it out automatically just like you would any other video we have, and keep track of how many people viewed it, who still has to view it, and that sort of stuff.
All right. So this is a sort of a follow-on to the previous question, but humans are creatures of habits and are predictable. How can you train them to be less predictable? I mean, it seems like security in some ways, or insecurity, relies on people being... And we're back, where I'm joined by Amit Nair, who is the VP of Product Marketing for HashiCorp. Amit, thank you for joining us in our studio today.
Thank you for having me.
So before we get started with some questions, give us the 30,000-foot elevator pitch about what HashiCorp is.
HashiCorp is the provider for multiple cloud automation technologies. We are the front door to helping you get to the cloud. And you are probably very familiar with some of the products that we have today in the open source world: Terraform for provisioning, Vault for security, Console for service mesh, and Nomad for application delivery. So yeah, we are well known in the open source community, very highly resourced, and we help companies move to the cloud.
Yeah, I hear your name a lot in very positive terms.
Yeah.
So that's always a good thing. So there's a number of trends that are happening in the market right now, and there's the people want to go to the cloud, right? The Microsoft, I hate the cloud thing, but they don't know how. How are you helping them figure that out?
Yeah, as we started talking to customers who are using our products on the open source side as well as on the commercial side, one thing we realized is sometimes they're not even set up for success internally in terms of their definition of cloud. Most organizations are multi-cloud as they exist today. They have some form of on-prem still, or virtual or hybrid, along with their cloud infrastructure, which could be in Azure or AWS or GCP. But as we started talking to them, what we realized is they don't have the right set of people in place, and by that I don't mean just replacing the existing set of people, but making sure the right knowledge base is set up for the folks to be successful. Skill sets, and making sure you have the right process in place before the tools are actually brought in to help drive that migration or the movement. There are multiple examples of customers that have declared, the CIOs would declare that they will be a full 100% cloud by the end of the year. Without naming names, without naming names, there's one customer that actually sold off all of their data centers. And then at the end of the year, they were 1% in the cloud, and they had to release their data centers back at double the cost. So
that's career limiting.
Yeah, I don't know if he's still there, but hopefully that is a lesson for other companies to understand and follow and learn from, which is really you have to set up a lot of things beforehand before you make that big, bold move.
Yeah, one of the things, let's just talk about that for a second. I hear a lot of people say, and in fact I've been told in some consulting work I did, I want to move this place 100% to the cloud. And my first question is why?
Yeah.
And my second question is how? And they can't answer the questions. They just know that they think they need to be in the cloud.
Yeah.
You probably see a lot of that.
Absolutely, and I would add the what as well, because because there are systems of record and systems of engagement. Systems of engagement, typically you move to the cloud because that's what you use and create your digital transformation on, essentially, even though that's a heavily used term as well.
Yeah.
But then there are systems of record that you might prefer to keep in your data center, your core use cases in terms of your data sets. So it's really understanding what you need to move, how you get there, and why are you doing it? Like, is it for agility? Is it to enable the new wave of developers who can actually get this digital transformation done for you in terms of building the right applications? And then the how is really what tools do I get in there to make that happen? Okay?
And it feels like if you don't have a deep and intimate understanding of the workloads you have and how they operate. Like a client server workload you dump into the cloud is not going to work well.
No.
But people do it.
They do it, and it fails, and it breaks.
And it becomes a terrible customer experience. It becomes downtime. It becomes expensive for the organization.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's highly unfortunate. So these people still want to move into the cloud in some way, shape, or form. So when you advise them, what are you telling them? Are you basically like, are you consulting with them in some way, or are you providing them services, or both?
Yeah, we don't provide consulting services, but essentially we are a partner with these customers. We want them to be successful. So it's really understanding their goals and working with them both on the open source side as well as on the commercial side to help them ease that workload in terms of getting to the cloud. The reason HashiCorp is really successful is because our open source products are really catered to helping individual practitioners be successful in the cloud, which means they have now a common set of templates and use cases that they can reuse across multiple developers on the Terraform side for provisioning, securing the enterprise with Vault, and so on, right? All of the products.
So you did a recent release of a new release of console as well as Terraform. So tell us about what's new.
So let me step back a little bit on the console side. As we started talking to customers about service mesh, what we really discovered was most customers are not fully understanding what service mesh really means, and there's a core use case around discovery that is really closer to their heart when you talk to them. What that means is because of this movement to the cloud, there's a lot of microservices being built out. For a person who's managing the network, they really want to understand what those services are, discover them, understand how to nuance them across multiple clouds, and then create the mesh. So there's a step before getting to service mesh that needs to be done in terms of discovery. Console did a really good job on the discovery side. We now have full service mesh capabilities as well, with some of the announcements at HashiCorp EU with gateway features as well as layer 7 features as well.
And you have some new partnerships as well, a company like ServiceNow and some others. You want to tell us a little about those and what they're enabling for your customers?
Yeah, so Terraform, as you know, is the infrastructure provisioning automation tool that we have heavily downloaded, 80,000 downloads a month as of today. And it is the de facto standard when it comes to provisioning infrastructure. And there's tier 1, tier 2 integrators into Terraform, providers that integrate with Terraform. ServiceNow is fully integrated now into Terraform, so you can actually call ServiceNow instances through Terraform and create workable sets using Terraform. So tighter integration with Terraform there. We also have strong integration with partners like Venafi on the security side and Vault. But in general, we also have close working relationships with all of the cloud partners, be it Azure, AWS, GCP, Oracle, and so on.
What are you doing with VMware? We're at VMworld, so I have to ask, what are you doing with VMware these days?
VMware has a strong integration on the Terraform side, on the infrastructure provisioning. So we also have, as I said at the beginning, we work both across hybrid and cloud, right? So it is a multi-cloud solution truly. So Terraform instances work very strongly with VMworld. So if customers have VMware instances, we can provision using our current existing templates on VMware. We also have strong integration on the console side, where we are working on how to best connect the capabilities on the service mesh side, both on-prem and on the cloud.
So you have some great partnerships, with, like you said, with companies like Amazon too, and they have great things to say about you guys. I mean, the Amazon CTO has talked about you as one of their key partners and some of the things you're enabling for your customers. And so you're not a slouch, which is great. In fact, you're going to be in Seattle next month?
Next month, September 9th and 11th.
For HashiCorp?
HashiCorp US, yeah.
And how many people are you expecting to attend?
1,500 to 2,000.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
It started out much smaller, not that long ago.
It was much smaller, yeah.
What's next? What's in the pipeline that you can talk about that is coming next that people are going to be super excited about?
Well, the core of who we are as a company is really entrenched in helping practitioners and developers be successful in the cloud, and by multiplication, essentially helping companies and organizations be successful as they move to the cloud. So all of the 4 products that I talked about really are driven towards building on those values. So on the console side, you'll continue to see evolution on service mesh capabilities as well as our integration with the ecosystem. We had a recent webcast with F5 where we talk about network automation as one of the capabilities in console by working with network infrastructure layer. So helping that migration happen on the cloud. Security will continue to evolve with Vault. Terraform providers will continue to grow, and Nomad, I'm most excited about from a container orchestration standpoint, is heavily utilized as well, and the feedback that we are getting on Nomad has been phenomenal from the open source community, and a lot of enterprises are taking note of that, and it's starting to move up the stack into larger enterprise commercial usage. For Nomad specifically and for all the products. So there's a lot of commercial usage today on Terraform, Vault, and Console, and Nomad starting to pick up on scale as well.
And that's one of the things I wanted to ask about was obviously an open source company, it's monetizing can be difficult. How's the trajectory been for you over the last couple of years?
It's been great. We have over 600 customers that are over in the G2000s, Global 2000s, with many of them in the Fortune 500 companies. We have customers across all verticals, be it banking, retail, healthcare, transportation, energy, NASDAQ. So there are a lot of big companies that are heavily dependent on HashiCorp from a security and collaboration as well as provisioning standpoint across multiple clouds. So truly enabling that cloud motion and making sure we have a standard default way to do it.
And they want to make sure they have the support there, so they're willing to pay some money to make sure that that happens.
That's correct. What also happens is as developers start to use these products, they notice that there are other people within the organization that are also using the same thing.
Yeah.
So the collaboration aspect becomes highly important. That's where the enterprise capabilities come in.
And if people want to learn more about HashiCorp, they can go to learn.hashicorp.com.
So hashicorp.com is the homepage. You can go find all the details there. Learn.hashicorp.com is an initiative and a process that we have done internally where we have an education team that's built out resources, videos, training materials that you can go and get trained on this new wave of moving to the cloud.
Very good. And good luck with HashiConf next month.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
And we'll be back in just a few minutes with our next interview. Predictable and doing what they expect them to do. How can you make this not happen?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I kind of like the idea of making them be predictable and a habit of doing a good thing. I mean, what's wrong with making a child predictable that they're going to look right and left before they cross the street, or turning on the seatbelt, or clicking in the seatbelt before they drive? I think that the key is that, and I absolutely think you need to make security, cybersecurity awareness and what you're doing in the world, you need to make it a habit, and you need to make it predictable that they're going to do it, that they're going to, when they walk away from their computer, that they're going to lock their computer. So I think the trick is to give enough constant security awareness where you're developing good habits and good predictable habits. I don't think there's anything wrong. I brush my teeth and I floss every day. Don't even really think about it that much. It's a good habit. And so we want to make good habits. And, we don't want to make them predictable in that, hey, they'll fall for the phishing scam. We want to make it predictable and a habit that they're less likely to fall for a phishing scam.
That's a good point. In fact, this is not necessarily with security, but I think predictability is in a lot of things in life is important. One of the things in where I live, and I'm sure it's this way everywhere, but people simply cannot do four-way stops. And one of the things that happens here is people are trying to be nice and wave people through rather than doing what the predictable thing is. And it's a safety thing. You're not supposed to be nice at a four-way stop. You're supposed to do what people expect you to do.
That's a great point. Great point.
And it seems like that makes more sense than trying to surprise people when they're on the road.
I'm going to steal that. I like that so much. I'm going to steal it for future presentations and claim it's mine. I like that.
Please feel free. So let's go to our next question, which is, how can I help users understand where potential threats originate? How do I help them learn what's coming from inside the company versus from external sources? This is a critical question.
So certainly I think people, at least, educate them on that. You've got threats that are going to be usually external, but we're actually starting to see an increase in threats that appear to be internal, or they appear to be, and they are coming from a longtime trusted company you're working with. So we try to tell people to be suspicious of any type of request, unusual request, for money transfer, for credentials, no matter where it comes from. But I think from a technical level, I like those systems that kind of tell you, like if you're in Office 365 today and they just did an update and you do an email outside your organization, it puts a little banner across the top going, warning, this is going from outside the company, or this email came from outside the company. And you can do technical things to try to do, use computer security controls that will inspect email that's incoming more than something that's local. But what we're starting to see again is a trend of the threats coming. They could be eventually from an external site, but they're actually, the hackers taking over a coworker's computer, or the CEO secretary's computer, or the an IT security person's computer, or your mortgage escrow loan officer's computer. And so you're actually getting threats from internal, or what look like internal trustworthy sources that are a bit unusual. But because you see them and you're like, oh, that's from somebody I know, and it really is coming from the real email address, you kind of trust it from the start. What we're saying is, regardless of its origin, if it looks suspicious, or it looks like it's a change, an unusual request for money or gift cards, or they're giving me a new bank account to wire information to, or hey, my help desk or my HR team is asking me for my W-2 information again. What we're trying to tell people is to be aware of these types of scams, and hey, pick up the phone. One of the best things you can do when you have something unusual is to pick up the phone. But you want to use security awareness training to let people know that there's threats from outside the company, from inside the company, and also from trusted vendors, right? A lot of people, if they got an email from a trusted vendor, even saying something kind of weird, they might tend to trust it more than otherwise. What we're saying is, regardless of where that email came from, if it's asking for unusual information, you need to be skeptical.
I had this happen this morning, believe it or not. I'm very pleased to finally meet in person, because I've talked to you on the phone a lot, Henning Volkmer, who is the president and CEO of ThinPrint. Henning, thank you for coming to our studio today.
Thanks for having me. It's great to finally meet you.
Yeah, and we've talked half dozen times on the phone, so this is fantastic.
Absolutely.
So, I was a CIO, and I came up through the ranks in IT. Started as a technician, did networking, help desk, all that good stuff. Became a CIO, and all through that, I had one common loathing, which was printers.
I don't blame you.
And tried to make them someone else's problem whenever I could. And that is something that you guys are really good at. Can you tell us basically at a high level, what does ThinPrint do?
We're all, like the name says, we're all about printing. We kind of came through the ranks off the virtual desktop industry, started out in a partnership with Citrix, with Microsoft. VMware licenses some of our technology for Horizon View. And we've been, over the last 20 years, been steadily building out a portfolio of enterprise-type print solutions to really make managing and administering printers as easy as possible, making sure users have a great experience. And then over the last couple, I think about 4 years, we've been adding a cloud component to our portfolio, everything that I'm sure you've talked about today is somehow cloud connected.
Oh, yeah.
We want to make sure that applies to printing as well, kind of very much in the spirit of what you say. Printing is necessary, but no one or very few people are really excited about it. So we want to make sure we bring as much of that as we can to us, so that you connect your desktops, you connect your printers, and that's all you have to do.
You know, as much as I say I don't like it, it's one of those things where if it doesn't work, users scream really fast. So
yeah.
it has to just work.
Yeah.
And that's something you help people with, which is fantastic. So tell us a little about, why printing is still so important. I mean, in this era of cloud and paperless offices and stuff, why there's the proliferation of printers still out there?
I think it's really the key connection between the digital world that we live in and the physical world that we live in. And whenever we go and talk to customers about what their projects are about, it's really interesting to see how intricate their scenarios are. Typically, when I think about printing, my mind gravitates to, there's like an office and cubicles or desks or whatever, and then there's a printer, and somehow somebody prints an Excel sheet because they work in finance or whatever it might be. But there's a whole other dimension to it, where you have label printers that go on products. Depending on how reliable that is, the products end up in different stores. The company makes more or less money depending on how long they're in a chain of transportation, for example. There's prescriptions, labels for bottles for medicine, and all those kind of things. And those things are really crucial, both financially but also from like a well-being kind of perspective. And then there's actually, we found some studies over the last couple of months that show that the younger generations that we tend to make fun of sometimes for whatever reasons haven't been exposed to this idea of the paperless office as much as a lot of our somewhat older people have, and they actually like a printed book. They like a printed document to read, get away from the screen for a while.
I believe that 100%. I have a daughter, she's 14. She's an absolute voracious reader. And the only time she'll read on a Kindle is if she absolutely has to. She wants a book. She's like, I don't want to read on a screen. I have enough screen time for everything else. I want to enjoy and get away with a book. And it seems like that's carrying over to printing. People want to be able to feel something in their hands.
Absolutely.
So tell us about the cloud service for printing that you've developed.
The cloud service we've developed is actually, to a degree, an acquisition from about 4 years ago. The company is called eZeep. It's a startup that was based in Berlin, just like ThinPrint is in Germany. And they kind of grew up in the co-working scene, where you have very diverse setups, you have diverse groups of users, you have people that move around a lot, and what they all need is somehow an easy way to connect users with whatever applications they have to their printers. And the eZeep team has done a fantastic job over the last couple of years. They're growing that solution, maturing the solutions, expanding the solutions. And then about, I would say 2 years ago, Microsoft started to kind of look into what is now known as Windows Virtual Desktops, and they approached us. And long story short, fast forward 2 years, we're one of the launch partners for Windows Virtual Desktop with that solution, exactly for that reason. We bring all the complicated pieces, drivers, ports, more ports, servers, what have you, into the cloud. We'll take care of it and make sure that whether it's a physical desktop or a virtual desktop, whether it's run by Microsoft or one of VMware solutions or Citrix, whoever, they just connect. We'll take care of the processing in the middle and all the routing of the jobs and all that kind of stuff. And on the other end, there's a printer that connects to the cloud, that connects to specifically an organization's account. So unlike consumer printers that you find in a store, it's really securely tied to your organization. And then the user gets an experience that is very similar to a printer or a printer plugged into a PC. I think that's probably the easiest setup that you can think of. But we can realize this for anyone all over the globe. It's run on Azure. It scales on Azure. And really make sure that yeah, like I said, both from an IT perspective, but also from a user perspective, the experience is as close to just plugging a printer physically in your computer as is possible.
So is it a situation where you basically install some kind of an agent somewhere, and you tell the printers to go look here, and then your software discovers the capabilities of that printer and all that good stuff? How does it actually work behind the scenes?
Very similar to what you're describing. The users' desktops have a print app on them where they log in with their user credentials. That could be Azure AD credentials. It could be for co-working spaces that don't have a directory, for example. It could be just regular user accounts with email address and password. And on the printer side, we have different ways to connect either a local machine. So let's say you're working from home, you connect your home computer to the cloud. The printer that's installed on there gets published. We have the connector piece for print servers. We have a small hardware device that can connect to a whole slew of printers in a branch office. Both of those components talk to the cloud, and the cloud in your organization's account knows which users they are, what groups they belong, hence which printers they should see, and all those good things that typically you do with group policies and fun, elaborate things you do with a couple clicks on a website, and that's really all that's needed.
And so this really does enable a distributed workforce in a lot of ways too, because like you said, adding a new printer can be a nightmare, especially if you need to have people around the world and all this other good stuff be able to print to it, but you can just do that.
Absolutely, yeah. If you need someone, obviously, to carry the printer into the office.
Right. You don't do that part?
No. Not at the moment, but if somebody wants to pay me real well, and they have maybe an office in a fun location, I'll gladly be there and do that for them. But typically, the printer comes into the office, a couple clicks to make sure we know the IP address, we know which users are supposed to see it, and then within a very short time frame, it populates into the users' desktops, and it's all ready to go.
And you said there's a device, there's either an agent or you can put on like a print server, or there's a device you can put on the network that basically does the discovery of the printers, or helps enable the discovery of the printers, and then that talks to the cloud component?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then it all just works by magic. Well, it's a lot of hard work, but to the user it appears to be magic.
We try to make it as magical as possible and hide all the work that the engineers put into it, and I think they did a really good job. It's really close to magic.
Is it does it support pretty much any printer?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we're in technology, so if you search hard enough, you'll find one from somewhere that doesn't work. Yeah. But our solutions have always been very, very printer agnostic. We want to make sure that it's the existing print infrastructure that's in place that might not be paid off yet, and all those good things, that whatever is in place ties into whatever the next step of, or whatever the next future of work is that a company wants to engage in.
And can you also support some of those things that people also just love, which is things like print chargeback and things like that, so the appropriate budget accounts can get charged for printing?
Absolutely. We're building that into the Easy platform as well. Coming from the co-working industry, that was an important thing and has always been there, that we have quotas, that we have chargeback, that we can actually do the billing for our customers, so that we have the credit card interface, we do the processing, we keep the account balances, and then depending on what pricing a customer sets for their users, we get a small cut of that, and everything else goes to whoever provides the printer.
Very good. And I will end this by saying thank you for doing the work that a lot of people just don't want to do. It makes people's life easier. And like I said, printers were the one thing where it's like, oh my God, I was actually in an organization where they hired printer technicians, and it's like, just don't. So it's nice to see that there's some of the hard work that's being taken out of this.
I'll gladly relay that to the team. Thank you very much. It's been fun talking to you.
You too. Thank you so much, Henning. And thank you to our audience for watching, and we'll be back shortly with our next interview. Our next question is, should behavior changes be taught, enforced, or both?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, yeah, it's both. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly both. I mean, we always say that it should be a combination of technical controls to the best of your ability. You need to have policy that people are aware of. So administrative policies that people know, hey, I shouldn't do this and I shouldn't do that. Or if I get a request for money that's above, $1,000 on an unusual day, the policy says I have to call on the phone. And even the person that, maybe there's someone legitimately requesting the money, they need to know that that person needs to call them. So you need to have policies enforced. You need to have technical controls. And those are the VPN, firewall, antivirus gateways that are trying to stop badness from getting into your environment. But you also need to do security awareness, because none of your technical controls are ever going to be perfect. And so it needs to be a combination of both. And again, it needs to be, and if someone violates something, it used to be in old days, we'd say, hey, you need to fire them or get them in trouble. These days, we're all about using positive reinforcement, because the data shows that if you use more carrot and less stick, these people that click on everything are more likely to be converted.
So I have a poll question up that basically asks, have you ever fallen victim to a phishing scam, even a little one? Be honest. I promise that it'll stay between the 143 of us. So never you have, or I begrudgingly admit that yes, I have fallen victim to something. So while we have that up, Roger, one of the questions is, we just got from the audience. Where is it? Sorry, I just lost it while I was putting the poll question up. We'll go to the next question in the deck. And again, if you have questions, please make sure you ask them in GoToWebinar. We will be, time permitting, we'll be asking you a question during the event. So to follow on to the next question, I think this is a really important one, is should lack of security awareness be cause for termination? And at what point should we consider such an action?
Well, I don't think lack of security awareness. I mean, usually lack of security awareness means that, you haven't been trained appropriately. But let's say that you've trained them appropriately and they're still clicking on everything. The famous story I like to tell is, I'm older, I'm 52, but back in the days of the I love you worm, this email attachment. It said, I love you. And if you clicked on it, it would infect your whole network and bring down email and all this stuff. Well, I had a CPA partner in the CPA firm where I was. He actually clicked on it 3 times in 3 days, infecting the whole network. And I went to him and said, hey, does this not look familiar, this thing you shouldn't be clicking on, the I love you? And he's like, no. And he was one of the smartest guys in the world. I literally was like, no one loves you. Stop clicking on this email. But you always have those people that click on everything. So I think better for the question is you give them an appropriate security awareness training, what you think is appropriate, but they don't seem to be converting. Well, the first thing is to understand that, ask them, hey, how can I help you? Because some people like to hear it. Some people like to see it. Some people like to, I had one user that was she was clicking on everything and I couldn't get her to stop. And I actually brought her into the HR sessions for new employees and asked her to share her experiences about her being phished and what they look like. And because she was part of the teaching experience, she actually got a lot better at stopping. She stopped clicking on stuff, right? So everybody has different learning styles. Use the data. Look at who is falling susceptible to what types of phishing scams. If you're, doing enough of it and getting enough of the data feedback, and try different things. And again, more carrot, less stick. It's all right to put in policy that someone, hey, if you violate it for the 19th time, we're going to fire you or something like that.
And thank you for tuning in. I am joined by Gijsbert Janssen van Doorn. I almost got it. A tech evangelist with Zerto. Gijsbert, thank you for joining us for our little chat today.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
We got to talk with ZertoCon earlier this year too, so we've gotten the chat a few times this year, which is great.
Yep.
But there's some really cool new things that you guys have announced at VMworld, which is where we are right now. So one of them is around VIO. You want to talk a little bit about what Zerto is doing with VMware on that front, and sort of what that means for customers?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we've been a VMware partner for many, many years already. Actually, even before we launched version 1.0 back in 2011, 2010 is actually when we started our tab. partnership with VMware, and we're actually tightening and getting more integrations with VMware. One of them being VAIO. So what we actually announced is our VAIO version of the product. So we are using VMware. We're supporting VMware since version 4.0.
Okay.
And actually with the new VAIO framework, we now are able to basically use all the capabilities that it gives to us. So integration with storage, policy-based management, the ability to support secure boot. So it's really for those highly secure environments.
We talked a little bit about this earlier this year, the beginnings of this at ZertoCon, but what does this mean for customers? Like, what kind of capabilities does this unlock for them? I understand that it gives them, storage policies and secure boot, but tell me how that translates into business outcomes.
So once you are in that ecosystem, part of the VAIO program, part of the VAIO framework, one of the benefits is that you'll get a signed driver. So that means that things like upgrades within the ecosystem, upgrades in things like vCenter, new filter drivers are all managed and controlled by VMware as well. So that means that they're aligning a lot better within the ecosystem of VMware, within Update Manager and things like that.
Very good. Just checking a mic issue here, so bear with me for 1 second.
No worries.
Go ahead. So is this basically built into the product now, and as customers that are under maintenance with you or something, they just get it now?
So it's actually part of a new version of Zerto, and will be GA'd around end of October.
Okay.
So that's when we're releasing it to the public.
Okay.
And like I said, the focus right now is really those customers that are in the more highly secured environments because of the requirements for secure boot, the signed drivers, and things like that.
Got it. Okay, so the other announcement is around analytics, resource planning, and IT resilience. So give us a 30,000-foot view of what that looks like.
So we have Zerto Analytics, which is a core component of our platform, giving you historical and real-time metrics and statistics about how is your protection doing, how much traffic is going back and forth, actually how are my applications doing right now. And what we added with Resource Planner, or with the planning capability, is really the future part of it. So we now allow customers to plan to build a new data center, maybe move into cloud, public cloud, want to extend their protection. Maybe they want to retain more data, have a longer retention, want to protect more virtual machines, more applications. With Zerto Resource Planner, we give them the capability to do that. And it's not only for existing customers, it's also a great tool for our partner ecosystem in onboarding new customers, helping them size the environment that they need for their protection and their DR site.
So one of the things that I love to talk about with you guys is your ledger, especially what you're doing with RTO and RPO, that people know about, but they don't know about how awesome it's gotten in the last year or two.
Yeah.
So give us a look at what you've done with your ledger and sort of what that means for customers for both basic, for backup and recovery, but also disaster recovery. I mean, it's a single tool for both now, whereas it didn't used to be. It used to be a DR tool. Now it's a backup and DR tool because of what you've done with your ledger.
Yeah, so the thing we've done is we're trying to flip around the way people think about backup nowadays. Backup's really been about pulling data from production systems and doing that once every few hours because it hurts production systems because they have to read data, use the network, and all these kind of things. We had this awesome technology, our CDP, the core of our technology, and our journal to deliver recovery to any point in time, seconds ago, with seconds granularity up to 30 days, but that doesn't really solve the compliance issue, the long-term retention issue. So what we've done is we've actually built long-term retention in the product, but it's a different way around. Because we have a copy somewhere else, we know exactly what's there, the VMs, what has changed. We can actually use that as the source of the long-term retention. Mm-hmm. So we're never looking at the production side again. We're just pulling it. It's basically, I call it CDP sourced backup. So basically we're taking it out of our journal, out of that ledger, and move it into the more cheaper, deeper storage for more efficiency.
And your shirt does say, you down with CDP? Yeah, you know me.
Exactly.
Which I, unfortunately, am old enough to understand the reference.
Me too, unfortunately.
So how is this being? How are your customers reacting to this sort of thing, and how are they reacting to the VIO and analytics news?
So the LTR piece, the main response from the customer was, finally,
Yeah.
good news, because we're struggling with all the issues that the more traditional backup approach has. So they're really excited about that. Planning features, people love it. We've seen a high adoption rate. We used to do planning, but that was based on Excel sheets, getting scripts to pull data from vCenter. But with analytics, we actually have the data, so why not use it for planning? So that's basically received really well as well. And we actually just did a VIO session with amazingly about 90% of the people in that audience were customers.
Oh, that's
so
awesome.
I didn't expect that, but it was really good to see. And they're responding well to it as well, because it does give them a few benefits. It does show that we are really have a really tight partnership with VMware, really a key part of their ecosystem as well. So it's good for them to see that and give them the confidence as well.
So if I'm a customer and I'm looking at these two announcements and I'm looking at my return on investment with Zerto, what does this do to improve that? I mean, obviously there's a business question here, but what does this mean from a dollars and cents perspective?
So we focus, for example, on planning. People are looking at adopting cloud in one way or another.
Haven't heard of that.
No, it's quite new, isn't it? So what's happening is that the first step that a lot of customers take and a lot of people do is start using cloud as a DR as a service component. So planning really helps them to show them the TCO benefits of actually using the cloud as a DR site. Once that is up and running, we can actually move workloads to there that might be maybe the right fit for using them in the cloud. So we're really helping that with that one platform. LTR, what we've done there is we basically added it to our license. So instead of using a different backup tool to back it up, just use the existing platform they already have to protect their environment. VIO opens up other doors for us as well. Maybe it gives us the ability to do CDP into VMC on AWS eventually. So there's a lot of things that it's opening up. Still, using the same product, the same platform, and the same license. So what we're doing is we're adding more and more value to our platform.
And you're also, especially with LTR and things like that, you're making it so that they don't have to have a second platform. So there's not just more value from Zerto. It's from a business perspective. It's get rid of another silo.
Oh yes. So we're removing silos. We're simplifying IT, and simplifying the operations, because our main goal is to make things easier. So all those use cases we support, it needs to be easy. And a great example is if I show someone an architectural overview of Zerto back in 2011 when we started, I can show them exact same picture right now. We haven't changed anything from an architectural point of view. It's simple. So you don't need additional components. We're making it so it scales. We have a perfectly fine scale-out architecture right now. And we're actually utilizing that to scale not into DR only, but in the other use cases as well.
So you're just continuing to innovate, drive value, and help customers do more things.
Absolutely.
And easier.
Easier. Absolutely. Easier. Remove complexity. No one wants complexity.
They don't. And that's, I think, a theme we've heard for years now. And there's still a lot of vendors that haven't gotten the message yet. So I'm very happy to hear that Zerto is walking the walk on that.
No, absolutely. We're continuing that path.
Gijsbert, thank you so much for coming by. We always like talking to Zerto.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And thank you to our audience for watching. We'll be back shortly with our next interview. Okay, so one of the audience members has just responded with the comment is good practice would be to set up an abuse mailbox for reporting suspicious emails or other actions. That's what they've done. What are your thoughts on that, Roger?
That's fantastic. Fantastic. So again, we have our you can download the free Phish Alert button and tie that to an email that ties to an inbox. But that's fantastic, because not only do you want to kind of gamify it and make employees think, hey, we're trying to spot the fake simulated phishes and the real phishes, but it's very important that your people that are in charge of responding to those types of events can see trends and patterns. And by that, I mean, I was at one major Fortune 10 company a couple of weeks ago, and there was a sudden Russian campaign, spear phishing campaign to phish their employees. And they had that sort of reporting mechanism. And the incident response people were able to see that 90 different people reported this sudden influx of this Russian spam, Russian spear phishing attack. And when they did the incident response, they found out that 134 of their employees had successfully responded with their credentials to that Russian mail, that Russian phishing attack. So by having people that didn't fall for it report it, and you know, your IT staff can go, hey, I'm starting to see this pattern here. Now we're going to run a query and see how many people got this email. And oh, I think in that particular case, they actually had they had black holed the all Russian IP addresses, so the email actually never got sent back. But I remember the CISO, he was screaming. He's like, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. You know, we've done the training. They were using a competitor's product, a good product, but it just didn't work for them in this case. And he was furious. He's like, I can't believe we have 134 people that fell for the scam, and they blocked it because they had another technical control. But it's good to be aware that that even happened, because that way you can say, hey, there's a gap. There's something that's broken in our technical controls and or our training to let this get through. And why did 134 people that were trained to expect this sort of thing, why did they fall for it, right? Sometimes success and failure gives you data points.
Absolutely. We do have a follow-up to the poll question. Someone said, I said never, but that might very well be yes, but I never found out if it was. So there's probably some of that in there as well.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So we'll do our next question, and this goes down to sort of a regulatory compliance, or there's every threshold of different organizations, different industries. So I work with doctors, and there are a lot of regulations in this arena. Can companies like KnowBe4 help me with specific healthcare and security needs? And this can really go across other industries as well.
Yeah, certainly. Again, we have over 1,000 pieces of content, and we have content for every type of compliance regulation you could think of. We have a lot of HIPAA stuff, HIPAA only stuff, and it's not just phishing stuff. Like for the HIPAA stuff, we have videos that talk about physical training, right, or physical controls, or where a person doesn't let another person piggyback to get inside of a hospital, or how to stop babies from being kidnapped, or whatever it might be. But we have very industry and vertical market specific training for many different companies and organizations and compliance needs. We certainly don't have them all. I think I read in a magazine article, Forbes or something yesterday, there was over 200 different compliance things that may hit a company in cybersecurity frameworks. But I don't think we cover all of them, but we certainly cover a lot of the main ones, and we certainly cover HIPAA. But I'd go even beyond that. Is not only do you want to have HIPAA specific training and compliance, but you need to interlace that with more general stuff. And what I mean by that is, you want to send emails that might be sent that are kind of healthcare specific, but you have to intermix that with very general types of phishes. Like the number one phish that people fall susceptible to is the free Dunkin' Donut phish, or the free Amazon gift card. But you want to intermix something that's specific for your organization and industry and compliance, but you want to mix it in with something that's more general, because in real life they're going to get a mix of both, and so you need to train your end users with both types of training.
Good point. Excellent points. So I don't know if it's more difficult or easier at scale, but how can human security be monitored at scale, and how can CIOs and CISOs get proper alerts as to what's working and what's not working in terms of human security?
Yeah, well, certainly with our product, and there's a reason why it's #1 security awareness platform around the world, is that there's lots of data. It will show you every success or failure at an individual level, department level, location level, and the global level within your organization. So automatically you can click and within 1 second get a good idea of how security awareness training is doing, who took the security awareness training, who still needs to take it, who partially took it, who needs to, who got successfully phished, what was the type of phish that got to them, did they click, did they provide credentials, did they, you can even drop USB keys in your parking lot, and that will be reflected in the statistics. And did they open up the document? Did they just plug it into a USB drive, or did they open up the document? If they opened up the document and they got prompted for credentials when they went to the website, did they put in their credentials and that sort of stuff? And you get the data, and it's crucial because different people and departments have different success rates. So you have to have that data. And one of the things I'm particularly proud of at KnowBe4 we have what's called a virtual risk officer. It actually assigns a risk score made of many different things. It's how risky the person or position is. Is their login name and passwords actually out there on the internet currently today, or have they been there in the past? How are they doing on their training? How have they done on their simulated phishing exercises? And you can literally get a risk score and see it going, up or down. Hopefully it's going down over time for the person or device. And for
Thank you for joining us for our next interview. I'm joined by Murali Gandluru, who is the Vice President of Product Management, and Khair Patel, who is the founder and CTO of Arcus.
Thank you for having us, Scott.
So before we get into the questions, can one of you tell me, what is Arcus? So our audience can learn.
Arcus is a software company that was, can we start again? Sorry.
We're live. So keep going.
So Arcus was founded in early 2016 to drive software-driven network transformation to empower the interconnected world. Essentially, our mission is to democratize the networking industry to be able to provide the best-in-class software with a flexible consumption model at the lowest total cost of ownership.
Very good. Now, there's been a number of things that Arcus has done in the past months and years to democratize the network, including common switching and routing software across lots of platforms, and there's some new stuff that's happened. So tell me a bit about your recent announcement. There's funding, routing launch, lots of good stuff that's been happening for Arcus.
As a part of our growing customer base and to support the rapidly growing customer deployments, Arcus announced the $30 million Series B fundraise led by Lightspeed Venture Partners. And that is a sign of confidence that the venture community, as well as our existing investors, General Catalyst and Clear Ventures, have shown in the progress that Arcus has made. We have 2 handfuls of customers and 4 handfuls of POCs out there. And part of that was the first announcement. The second announcement is that Arcus also announces support for the industry's highest density 100 gig and 400 gig routing platform based on Broadcom's Strata DNX Jericho 2 based chipset. And the third announcement is ArcIQ. ArcIQ is an AI-driven network operations center NOC analytics platform that helps detect anomalies, provide alerts, and is able to secure your network infrastructure.
So what makes ArcOS unique in the market?
Well, Scott, with an advent of new technologies like ML or IoT, or you start looking into 5G transformations, what they're doing is they're putting an increasingly stress onto the networks to become more smarter, intelligent, secured, and scalable. This in turn is causing a transition within networks, we think, that is going towards layer 3 or routing, right? And as it goes towards layer 3 or routing, performance and scale matters, which means that you need to take the existing switches and routers and actually scale them up or out in terms of their architecture. Well, from a merchant silicon world, there has been lots and lots of innovations happening in terms of port densities, port speeds, power per consumptions in terms of ports, and that's driving the innovation from the hardware perspective. ArcOS is a unique operating system. It's an open integration-based operating system designed from first principles that could run on switching and routing, and can do and therefore can be a switch or a router that can help address a lot of this scale and performance issues for the new transformations that are happening from a systems viewpoint as a whole.
But it also has a complexity and some angle as well. By having a single platform that can do routing and switching, I mean, you know, there's others that can do something like it, but not quite as comprehensively. So you're basically bringing some simplicity rather than having different software stacks running on each.
Indeed.
And complexity is something everybody's trying to drive out of the enterprise
Exactly.
in order to be able
Exactly.
to focus on applications and scale and growth.
Exactly.
So when you think about the competitive architectural differences in the platform, what makes Arcus different than everyone else?
So it's designed as a 64-bit OS, which means it can scale in terms of memory. It's a scale-out operating system, which means the key software components of ArcOS can scale out in terms of cores. Everything is in user space, which makes HA models very simple because you can compile them pretty easily. Your upgrade stories become very easy, and you minimize the downtime. Of course, as you know, on routers, minimizing downtimes when you're doing upgrades means a very, very simple HA story. Now, because it can scale out in terms of cores, it can do key features like telemetry at scale, no problem. And last but not least, it's a model-driven orchestration and management. The models are based off standards-based open config models, and therefore it helps reduce the OpEx of the network and network operators.
Very good. So tell me about some of the key use cases that Arcus is tackling today.
So Arcus is focused on 4 key use cases. First is the data center. Then is the peering routers, because as you build out more and more sites, whether that's edge sites or the traditional data centers, you want to be able to connect into the internet or connect into the backbone. So peering routers, virtualized, containerized route reflectors that are increasingly becoming the centralized policy engine for making decisions of your control plane of your network, actually the full wide network. And then your cloud routing, where you essentially have the ability to provide containerized hosts, either in your private cloud or on top of a public cloud. So the ability to provide all of these 4 and get into those next set of use cases are the key underpinning of ArcOS.
So you're able to run on the merchant silicon that we talked about with routing and switching, and the software can also run on the cloud. So you have a common networking fabric that spans the data center, the edge, the cloud, all use cases.
Absolutely.
Tell me about what Arcus, this is not something we talked about beforehand, but tell me about how you'll help enable like 5G and things like that. There's going to be huge backbone needs for some of the emerging networks, and it seems like from some of the things you're doing with 400 gig, all that good stuff, you're going to be well positioned to help enable some of those needs.
Right. So as these advancements that you talked about come to bear, and in fact 5G trials are already out there, and there's already a few 5G enabled environments, what you'll see is the network itself undergoing a massive transformation to support digital initiatives of enterprises as well as providers. So when that happens, essentially what it means is that one of the key requirements of the end customers being their end user experience is going to be of prime importance, and that means that your network is going to go further and further out to the edge. So you need to build out distributed environments, and that means high density 100 gig, high density 400 gig over time, and all of those are a key part of this announcement that we did, which is from a routing platform perspective, connecting the data center to the backbone, to the edge, and of course virtualized instances in the cloud or on your private cloud.
And if you look at Jericho 2 as a system, it has a much better power utilization with the port densities in place. It can support, I believe, 48 port 100 gigs, 10 terabyte chip. If you couple that with a scalable operating systems that can scale out in terms of cores, then what you have is a solid router that Mulli was alluding to that can address the scale and performance of these networks as they start to scale out.
And the whole Arcus solution is API driven, correct? So from an app dev perspective, it's fully programmable infrastructure
Yes.
as well, so it can be part of the DevOps lifecycle, and
Yes.
it can stand up infrastructure as needed, wherever it's needed.
Effectively zero-touch programming. Yes.
Very good. So give me a use case around ArcIQ. Tell me, from a customer perspective, what does that do for me?
So ArcIQ was designed to support three key fundamental principles of your network infrastructure. One is, in this transformed network world, visibility into your network, whether that's in the data center, whether that's at the edge, is very critical. Control of that network, having the ability to make decisions in real time is important, and then security. So two good examples of ArcIQ that we already announced is, one is securing your control plane of your network. By providing you origin validation, you learn a route from a peer. You want to know whether that route is actually from the location that it says it's originating from.
Right.
And you can do origination validation right there live. And then the second one is DDoS mitigation, the ability to use a combination of BGP flow spec and the ability to have intelligent insights from ArcIQ, make a determination whether a flow is should be shut down, and providing the list of an easy to map view for operators to decide which flows were DDoS flows and which ones are fine. That secures their data plane. So that is a very good example of how ArcIQ would be used in conjunction with your network devices.
It also does a lot of grunt work for the operators,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
That they used to do. I remember 10 years back, or when we were debugging the networks, the operators would write scripts to monitor process utilization, CPU utilization, stuff like that, the real estate in the box, right? All that is automated now with ArcIQ. So you do not have to write a single script. What it means is operators can now evolve themselves and do much more meaningful things, leveraging all the grunt work off to ArcIQ-like platform, right?
Right.
Excellent. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us in studio.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
And we'll be back shortly with our next interview. Thank you for watching. So Roger, can you give us a brief overview of what KnowBe4 does and why securing the human layer is so important?
So yeah, it's a great questions. And just starting with, KnowBe4 is the world's leading security awareness and training vendor. They've been around for about 7 years and just doing great in the industry in the world. But what it does, and the reason why I joined them, I'm relatively new, only joined a year or so ago. I was with Microsoft for 12, 15 years before that, and McAfee before that. But what they do is, essentially try to increase the security culture awareness within an organization. And specifically, they do that really well by doing a combination of simulated phishing campaigns against employees to find out who are the weak links or who can be tricked, followed by lots of training. We are literally like the Netflix of security awareness training. We have thousands of videos, we have games and posters, and some of our security awareness training even is like very Netflixy, meaning that we have these like 12 episode series that have spies and all kinds of intrigue and cool stuff in it. But overall, what we're trying to do is help organizations increase the overall computer security awareness of badness in their environment, and helping to regular end users to detect it and put it down. And the reason why it's so important is that survey after survey for at least the last 7 years has shown that phishing and social engineering is responsible for 70 to 90% of all malicious data breaches. 70 to 90%. I think the highest figure I've seen is 91%. But think about that. That means that one thing, we're told to be worried about all kinds of stuff. 16,000. So last year there was over 16,555 new security vulnerabilities you're supposed to be worried about. Well, unpatched software and the security vulnerabilities, they only make up about 20 to 40% of malicious data breaches. But phishing and social engineering makes up, 70 to 90%. Whatever that percentage is, it changes each year. Whatever it is, it's always been the largest percentage. It used to be unpatched software and unpatched Oracle Java in particular and Adobe Acrobat. Well, it's moved for the last 7 years because everybody's starting to patch better into social engineering and phishing. And so, KnowBe4, I think I joined them because they're kind of uniquely, present to be in the right field to stop most of that. When I was at Microsoft, I was doing all these really cool projects. I was securing Windows, Windows Vista, Windows 7, Windows 10, Active Directory. I was doing PKI and smart card projects, and I was doing all this advanced stuff. And I was doing really well. I was being recognized in my industry. I was doing a good job for my customers. But then I realized that those people were getting just as hacked after I left trying to secure them as they were before I was. And no matter what Microsoft put in their operating system, no matter how much more secure they made it, all the people are still getting infected and exploited, and almost always through social engineering. And I started to think, wow, I felt like I was wasting my life. And so I looked for a company that was doing a really good job in security awareness training and trying to stop that #1 main threat. And I ended up with KnowBe4, and I absolutely love it. Love the CEO, Stu, and the whole company. It's one of the funnest places in the world I've ever worked. And people like our software, and you have fun while you're trying to help people.
That's a good thing. I was actually on site at a KnowBe4 client earlier today. It's all over the place. So let's go to our next question. And I want to remind the audience that we really do want your questions. So please ask early and ask often so we can make sure we take your questions throughout the event. So one of the questions that we got from the audience, and this is word for word, is how can I train my users to not click on everything they see? It's a big problem. Roger, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, it's not an intelligence thing, right? I think a lot of us in IT think, I've even heard the term, end loser. We got these people that keep clicking, and and people think it's an intelligence thing, but it's not. We've actually worked with different universities and continuing to work with some universities, working with the University of Central Florida right now, trying to track down the traits that make somebody more or less susceptible to social engineering and phishing. And one of the big early takeaways is it doesn't have anything to do with intelligence. You've got doctors, lawyers, PhDs, you've got Nobel Prize winners, that are susceptible to it, and not dumb people. But what we found out is that it mostly has to do with, are you aware of a particular type of scam? Are you skeptically thinking? So the people that get tricked more often, the people that are a little bit less, I guess for lack of a better word, less criminal themselves, and they don't have that healthy skepticism that they should. Like, they don't know that Microsoft doesn't proactively call you to tell you your computer's infected and offer to help you out. In the real world, us IT people
Hi there, thank you for coming back. I am joined by Daniel Spoonhour, or Spoons for short, I suppose. He is this co-founder and CTO of Lightstep. Spoons, thank you for coming by today.
Great to be here.
So before we get into more of a discussion, give me the 30,000-foot elevator pitch on what Lightstep does.
Sure. So we're a performance monitoring tool for modern applications. That means understanding things like errors, latency, tying what your users are seeing back to what's actually happening in your application itself.
Okay. This is all around, there's a need for this because of new application development methodologies, including things like DevOps.
That's right.
What kind of challenges has DevOps introduced that have made this necessary?
So one thing, as teams have kind of broken apart their source code, broken apart their application to a lot of pieces, that's allows them to work more independently. At the same time, that means that they also need to be able to communicate and understand who's to blame for things, or maybe reward when things go well, but usually the other one. That means that when performance is slow for one team, they want to understand if it's their own fault or if it's something that they can go talk to another team about. And having fine-grained performance data is a key way to do that.
And so you get down to the container level, or do you go deeper?
To some extent in the container layer, we try to map between sort of the application and the infrastructure, although a lot of these things end up being at the application layer in a lot of ways.
And so basically, if I've got a slowdown somewhere, obviously, I mean, I used to do coding way back in the day, but it's been far too long. But slow code can be problematic.
Absolutely, and I think knowing the right slow code is really important. Your code might be slow, but it might not be that your code is actually on the critical path. It might not be actually affecting users. If you were going to go improve the performance of that, you're just wasting your time. So part of it is actually understanding where the right slow code is to fix.
That's interesting, because I didn't think about that until you just said it. So slow code is not necessarily bad. It's bad if it's in the wrong place.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so how do you do this? I mean, are you watching every packet that's going across the network? How is this working?
Yeah, we focus mostly on requests as sort of the primary or the kind of initial data source, but we do look at every request even between containers, and we try to map into that other parts of the application performance.
So tell me about some of the things you've been doing recently. What we've talked about before is some of the observability things you've been working on as a research, just for a research undertaking.
Yeah, so one of the things that we're trying to do is really try to help people understand how their observability tools need to shift as they make these both organizational and architectural changes. And one of the ways that we're trying to do that is by just demonstrating how to do it right. And that means starting from what your customers are seeing and mapping that down into the infrastructure, and it might even be to your managed infrastructure as well. A lot of the research that we've currently done is looking at comparing things like AWS Lambda versus Google Functions, different storage solutions. And it's really surprising to us the kinds of things that we've found in there. A lot of our assumptions going in have been wrong.
Give me an example.
So we sort of, looking at Google Cloud Functions calling into Google Cloud Storage, we assume that'd be faster than the same Google Cloud Functions calling into AWS. It's cross-vendor, it's got to go through the internet, it's going to be slower. We didn't realize it was going to be 4 times slower to do that. And it's actually, the reasons why are really interesting. A lot of the interesting engineering that was done on the Google side. But the thing that I sort of took from it is really thinking hard about what your use case is. Saying one is better than the other is not going to be true for all applications.
Right.
And so really focusing on what does your application need from this infrastructure and making sure that you're getting the best performance for what you need.
So are you looking at infrastructure and code, or are you looking at primarily code?
Mostly code. We work with a project called Open Telemetry, which is part of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. That's sort of an API and a bunch of libraries and other tooling for getting the data out of applications, and you can plug that data into Lightstep.
So who is using Lightstep? Is it developers? Is it operations people? Is it customer experience people? Who is using the tool in their organizations?
Yeah, so the primary users today are around engineers looking at performance, on-call engineers trying to mitigate incidents. We do see some engineers thinking about longer-term performance work using Lightstep. Again, going to not all slow code is bad, but it has to be in the right place. So thinking about planning their work for the next couple of months. We are starting to see some people on the customer experience side see it as well, especially for SaaS solutions, where those customers are pretty savvy about the performance that they expect to get.
And so they're looking for ways that they can obviously improve. Are you integrating with any of the customer experience platforms like the Tango or anything like that at this point?
Not yet, and then this is sort of early use in a lot of ways, but it's interesting to see them try to use it to take a more proactive stance. So they can monitor specific customer experiences with Lightstep, see that maybe performance is starting to degrade and reach out and say, hey, maybe you haven't noticed yet, but we're on top of it. We've seen some degradation in your performance. We're already working to remediate it. But just so you know, everything's fine, rather than having the conversation go the other way around.
And when it comes to obviously understanding whether it's an infrastructure or code issue, there's different tools that they need to use for the infrastructure side, and they have to try to correlate that.
Yeah, so that's one thing that Lightstep, I think, has done really well and is really interesting, is that by ingesting all this data, and looking at every application request, we're, in addition to looking at some of the infrastructure metrics, we're actually able to do a lot of that correlation automatically. So we can't necessarily tell you that the problem is right here, but we can help you build hypotheses and help let you validate those.
Okay, so you could basically say, look, the application is slowing down at this time. Let's go see what was happening on storage. at
Exactly.
that point or something
right.
like that.
So an example, actually, as we were building this feature, one of our engineers, and actually one of our more senior engineers, was experimenting with it, and we use it in some of our internal systems to monitor how they're working. And what he found is he saw a correlation with a particular host, and he thought it was actually just a bug in our code. But he went and he looked and validated, and actually that host was extremely overloaded. So the tool had actually found performance degradation as we were doing it, but in a way that an engineer didn't expect at all.
That's interesting. So again, it provides you with the breadcrumb you need to go find.
Exactly, exactly.
So how do customers deploy this? I mean, what is it?
So Lightstep is a hybrid deployment. It's part on-prem and part SaaS. That's partly just due to the kind of economics of the amount of data that we're talking about here. So for our bigger customers who are have consumer or are in the consumer space, they're handling millions of requests per second. We want to see and analyze all of that data, and for them to send that kind of telemetry over the internet would be pretty expensive. At the same time, obviously, there's a lot of advantages to a SaaS model, and so we kind of take a hybrid approach to it.
So with that much data, and does Lightstep ever induce the problem?
Yeah, there's sort of, we like to say, first do no harm. And that's something that we think about a lot in terms of getting the data out of the application as quickly and with the least impact as possible. This work is partly based on stuff that we did at Google at the time, and when one of my co-founders and I were there. And what we found, even in Google, you could turn on this kind of performance monitoring in production all the time without a significant impact. The cost really came around to storing all the data.
So what kind of storage capacity do some of your larger customers need to consume to be able to hold all this telemetry?
Yeah, so we try to do the filtering as quickly as we can, usually within a couple of minutes. And from there, we're actually able to cut down the volume of data pretty significantly.
Okay, so it's not like we're talking about petabytes of data that have to be stored somewhere.
That's right, and we do all of the durable storage on the SaaS side. So the on-prem component is pretty light. We try to make it as light as possible. Okay,
but again, do no harm. Try to get out of the way as fast as you can.
Exactly. Step lightly.
Yeah, it's almost like you should name your company something like that.
There are a lot of reasons, but that was one of them that made sense. So.
Okay, what were the other reasons? Can't remember. Just
something about co-founders arguing about things.
Got it. I understand. So, what is coming next? Like, what are your big plans?
Yeah. So. I mean, we're thinking a lot about how do we continue to automate a lot of this? How do we make it easier for users to find these insights? Really, we see a lot of our mission in terms of helping users understand the sort of depth of complexity and simplifying that for them by showing them sort of the 5 most likely hypotheses. And there's a lot of work that we're continuing to do to make that easier and more efficient.
What about integration with other tools like some of the infrastructure monitoring or SIMs, like security infrastructure management systems? I mean, I could see the potential for you uncovering potential security issues.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that we've definitely thought about and is on the roadmap. At Google, actually, we saw a lot of uses for this kind of data, not just in performance management, but in things around, for example, chargeback, quota enforcement, security. There's a lot of different reasons why this data is really important for many aspects of the business, not just operations.
Because if you're seeing every packet, every request, if developers start to see anomalous requests, especially if you learn a baseline, right?
Yeah, exactly.
There's potential for them helping uncover issues. If people want to learn more about Lightstep, what can they do?
They can visit lightstep.com or research.lightstep.com, where we have some papers that we've published there about some of these results, where we've done some of this work. You can certainly check out OpenTelemetry. That's our the open source group that we do a lot of work with. And yeah, we'd love to hear from folks.
So back to the research just for a minute. What other research have you done? Because that's really interesting.
Yeah, so we're just kind of at the beginning of it. Really, again, I think one of the big themes of it is to know what your customers are experiencing and know the service that your vendors are providing. Vendors have SLAs. They're beholden in some way to give you some good performance, but their incentives are never as strong as your incentives.
Right.
And so it's really on you to really monitor the performance you're getting and not make the assumption that everything is going to be fine or that their status page is going to reflect what's there. So a lot of our focus on the research side is trying to understand and really demonstrate how people should think about using vendors.
Very good. Spoons, thank you so much for coming to the studio.
Yeah, it was great to be here. Thanks.
And thank you for watching. We'll be back shortly with our, I believe, final interview. All right, let's go on to the next question. We got quite a few questions, so I want to make sure we get through them. So this is really two ways to ask the same question. We had two people ask it, and I wanted to ask it in both ways. One is, how can I instill a culture of strict security enforcement without being too intrusive? Or how do you create a security environment that is welcoming but firm to employees? And this is an interesting balancing act that security people really have to be thinking about. What are your thoughts, and what are KnowBe4's thoughts on this question?
So, we look, trying to create a security culture is like kind of getting an infant or a toddler to look both ways before crossing the street, right? You just try to teach it and you make it a normal part of their lives, the education to be aware of looking right and left for cars before you cross the street, so that it becomes a natural part of the behavior. We certainly, our big thing, what we've seen the best success for customers is that they first figure out a baseline of how phishable people are in their environment. So they send out some type of general phish that nobody should fall for, but so it's not very crafty. It looks like a phish. And what they're going to usually find out is somewhere between 25 to 40% of their end user base is susceptible to phishing. And then start giving them education. Give them, every time if someone gets hired, you give them a longer, 30, 45-minute broader video and training that's on, phishing and all the different types. And then, you test them once a quarter, once a month or whatever. You send them a simulated phishing email. And if they fail, you want to give them immediate feedback of, hey, this is a phish test. Here are the things you should have seen that would have told you that it was a phishing test, and then you send them, you can send them training then, or you send little, it could be little videos or little outlines. You literally want to create a culture of security awareness, and you want to make them aware that they're not going to get in trouble if they get phished. Like, hey, I think I got phished. I need to report that to the help desk or incident response team. You need to let them know that we're all in this together, and you're consistent. What you don't want to do, a lot of companies give 5 minutes, 30 minutes of security awareness training once a year. There is not a lot of value in that. You want to provide it more often than that. You want to make it a part of the environment. You want to, try to make it fun. Try to make it a game. Tell people, we believe in more carrot and less stick these days. And so that, when someone, say, oh, if everybody in your department successfully catches the fish and reports the, the fake phishing or the real fishes or whatever, we'll have a pizza party or something like that. But you want to create an environment where more carrot, less stick, where people are actually encouraged to be better because it's going to result in some sort of reward. And then, trying to make them skeptical, a little bit more skeptical, just like they would, today we're all skeptical when we're, walking across the street or walking in a new foreign city or something like that. You just try to make it natural so they really don't even have to think about it.
Another question from the audience, and the question is, how concerned should we be about mobile mail apps like iOS Mail App? I understand that they're sandbox, but are they more or less secure than desktop clients?
Mobile apps are probably easier to hack. Well, let me say at least as easy to hack as a desktop. And it depends on whether you've jailbroken your phone or something. But everything that can happen on a desktop can happen on a mobile client. The only saving grace is that there's less actual data on a mobile phone. But what we are starting to see is a lot more attacks and phishing attacks that come across mobile phones. And there's less information for you to evaluate whether or not that's a phish, because the screen you get and the information that your email client is showing you is far less. And so when we do studies, people that get the same phish on a mobile platform than they did on a desktop platform are far more likely to click on the phish and be fooled by the phish than the desktop client. The desktop clients have lots of real estate where you can see that it has a bogus URL and it'll show the name twice, and you just have better defensive tools. But the saving grace for the mobile environment is that there's just not as much information there. So if they ransomware, lock your phone up, well, it's a bad thing, but they didn't lock up the company.
Next question. What are some of the worst social engineering outcomes you've seen? This was a question right from the audience. Like, tell us the horror story that keeps you awake at night or makes you laugh. I don't know, either way.
Well, I mean, I guess it's, the ones, they're actually pretty...
Welcome back, and thank you for joining us again. I am joined by Matt McPhail, who is the Director of Systems Engineering for Scale Computing, and you live right here.
I do. Thank you so much for having me. It was an easy commute.
I'm sure it was, because you guys are right around the corner.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming by. I like Scale. You guys do some really cool stuff.
Well, thank you.
I've actually gotten an opportunity to talk to you a lot over the years, a lot this year.
Yep.
You guys are doing some really cool things around enterprise, which wasn't necessarily where you started to play. I mean, you were an SMB in lower end of the mid-market.
Correct.
And enterprise was probably not on the roadmap until someone said, hey, guess what? There's these sprawling enterprises that just need little edge things everywhere. Let's do that.
Absolutely.
Tell me about how that happened.
Well, first of all, we really appreciate the support you've given us over the years. So you've been a huge advocate for us, and so thank you so much
you're welcome.
again for the time.
Well, you guys are great. You're good people too.
And that was our whole idea with this. So we saw a need that a lot of companies needed as far as being able to help, not with the Fortune 500 or with the enterprise. It was truly around, hey, how can we do hyperconvergence for mid-market? Or how can we do hyperconvergence for robo? How can we do it in a way that actually fulfills our underlying need of consolidating disparate workloads outside of the traditional data center and do it that is in a way that's easy. So what we did with Edge was we looked at it and saw exactly that. Now there's this huge enterprise need where you can't put everything in the cloud.
No.
You can't put everything in the data center. You can't have massive data centers at remote offices, at branch offices, or other deployments.
Or grocery stores.
Or correct,
yeah,
retail
like
environments. That. So for that, we saw, well, this is a great fit for what we're doing already. We've got a low footprint, a small form factor. We can put in different and disparate environments and really make what we've done for so many years fit for the enterprise, to your point.
You know, one of the things I think people don't understand or don't even know sometimes is what you mean by low footprint. And it means basically, if you look at some of the hyperconverged solutions on the market, there's a pretty big resource footprint that they need in order to be able to support deduplication.
Correct.
And just support running the environment, which means that the baseline environment, even to get into a sprawling robo scenario, has to be much bigger, much more complex.
Correct.
You guys are a fraction of the size from a resource requirement standpoint, so you can go smaller.
Yeah, by design. I mean, the whole idea was flexibility needed to be there at the beginning for some of these other hyperconvergence vendors. We completely see that. So they saw the need to be able to support Hyper-V or to be able to support VMware. And we looked at that as an opportunity for us. Because if we consolidate the stack, we make it something that is extremely efficient, and we support an in-kernel version of KVM, we can actually have our footprint that is extremely small compared to what everyone's having to do with the traditional VSA model. So how that affects Edge is now you've got these low footprint Intel NUCs or specifically designed Lenovo boxes that are being deployed out on Edge, or credit card size PCs that if they've got anything more than 4 gigs worth of RAM, now you've got resources for your specific deployment because we don't need anything past that.
And if you think about a lot of retail environments, all they need is a place to run POS systems, because you don't want to run, a lot of those you don't want to run connected to the cloud for obvious reasons around connectivity, security systems, and maybe time clocks.
Correct.
So they're not super high, they're not super heavyweight applications.
But they're valuable.
They're valuable and they're critical. They're mission critical, but they're not heavy.
Correct.
And you provided a platform that can help these organizations run these things.
Yeah, we were working with a casino, and one of the things the casino wanted to do was they wanted to be able to track their high rollers. And how do you do that? Well, you have to have enough compute to be able to look at the data that's coming from the cameras, the data that's coming from the swipe cards from the large bets, and the data that's looking at it from the cashiers. That's correlated to the location of where that high roller is so that someone can come up, give them their specialized drink, shake their hand, offer them a free room, or do something that is critical to expand the business. couldn't do that in the cloud. You couldn't do that at a data center, but you can do those type of things in the edge.
Yeah.
Like the POS system that you're talking about, or specific sensor data that's associated with refrigeration, which now needs to be tracked.
Right.
So
yeah, sensors are the future. So
Correct.
that's one of the reasons why the edge is becoming so critical. And the edge doesn't just mean a store or retail. It means cars. It means boats. It means wherever that's not inside a data center or in the cloud.
Correct.
Now, obviously, you're not playing in all those spaces yet, but you could.
Yeah. With the form factor there's no reason why not.
Yeah. So now, when we look at this from a centralized perspective, if I've got 1,000 locations where I've got to deploy this, and what does that mean for me from a management data protection and just operations standpoint?
So you look at it from a couple of different ways. Obviously, there's got to be a centralized NOC that's going to handle that. So you've got built-in tools that are associated with it from a DR perspective, whether it's getting data from each of those different
And you do that?
Yes. Each of those different sites directly to the centralized location so that you can maintain the data, but you can also do it backwards. So you can push specific applications out to each of those different sites so that everything can be controlled from a centralized location. But then from there, you've got the ability to look at a multi-cluster management piece that can look at every single one of those retail sites. And then instead of going from a reactive perspective, where if something breaks, well, I've got to send out
a roll a truck.
I got to roll a truck. Now, like we've done at a European retail store, they've got a proactive environment that states that every 90 days, a tech comes out and fixes whatever has been broken at the site. Doesn't mean they're down because they've got the high availability of traditional HCI. But what it means is that now they can be proactive with, I only need to bring these parts or these pieces to make sure that every single site is optimal. So on top of that, now you've got the ability to run the multi-cluster management, the proactive piece, the replication, and then from there you start building in API tools and Ansible and other automation that truly makes it as hands-off as possible. I mean, you've worked with us for many years. Our goal has always been to be as simple and as easy for the IT professional as possible, because I will freely admit that infrastructure by some of the companies that are really local to us right now, they try to make it look very sexy. It's not.
Right.
It's the application. It's what is being done at the retail store that is truly what's important to the business. The infrastructure underneath, we're a commodity.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I used to be an infrastructure guy, and I just want crap to work now.
Exactly.
That's really what it boils down to, is I just want to get stuff done.
Yep.
In fact, one of the things that's interesting is that I talked to some folks in the community, they like scale, but they look at the interface and they're like, this is uncomfortable because there's no nerd knobs.
Right, of course.
You know, and my first experience with it was like, this is weird because I can't just go tune whatever I want, but I don't need to. It just works.
Yeah,
so
it definitely is the opposite of a learning curve, because now you don't have to learn as much and you can be okay with it. We've actually had customers put in requests for notifications around telling me when I need to go to my scale cluster because I've forgotten about it.
Right.
And I guess that's a good thing.
It reminds me of the days when I used to manage, this is going to date me a little bit, but netware servers.
Yes.
Because there would be...
Absolutely.
I used to work in K-12, and I'd go to a building, and there would be a netware server that had been lost. And I'd look at it, and it would have been up for 380 days. Nobody knew it.
Yep.
Because it just worked. And that's something that's really nice to see.
We've found servers walled in before.
Have you really?
Yes, because
I've heard stories.
The server room has accidentally been part of a remodel and they forgot about the
putting a door in.
Exactly.
That's unfortunate on a number of levels, but hey, if the stuff just works, I guess that's okay.
Exactly.
Matt, thank you for coming by. Really nice talking to you.
I appreciate it.
And thank you to our audience for watching. We'll be back with our final interview in just a few minutes.
And the worst social engineering outcomes is people that say, hey, we can't train our employees, our boss, or somebody won't let us, send these simulated phishing. emails, and because someone got mad or somebody phished the CEO 2 years ago and didn't tell the CEO what was going on. And so they're not allowed to push these training and simulated phishing campaigns to people. And that used to be like the norm. Today, it's the rare company that can't send them, but I still see people that can't send them, and they are getting successfully phished. And of course, it's the ransomware stuff, right? I mean, it's where the entire companies, entire hospitals, they get social engineered to running ransomware, and their company is shut down for days to weeks. I was just talking to the FBI yesterday, and they told me they had one FBI client that got ransomware. They got social engineered and running ransomware. It locked up all the company's computers, and they paid $1.6 million to get the ransomware key to unlock the computers. They actually had backups, but they realized by the time they got through doing all the data restores that it was going to cost them more in consulting time and downtime and revenue than to pay the $1.6 million. They paid the $1.6 million, and the ransomware key that they were sent did not unlock their data. So now they're trying to negotiate with a ransomware creator, going, "Hey, your encryption key did not unlock it. Can you help us?" And I don't know. I do not know whether or not they are successful in getting their data unlocked. But they paid $1.6 million, and it didn't unlock their data.
That's unfortunate. There's probably not a money back guarantee with those things.
Yeah. You hope there's honor among thieves, but I wouldn't. The FBI says you shouldn't pay the ransom. But somewhere on the team, somebody for that company said, no, we got to pay it. We got to pay it. Everybody agree. And then when it didn't work, that has to be an uncomfortable conversation to take back to the CEO.
I would agree with that. So here's another one. How do I keep people from sharing passwords to secure resources? We see this all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, certainly education is the way that you start. But I tell you something I do a lot is I tell people to take one of those password, programs or queries that will go out on the internet and the dark web and find out how many times their existing login names and passwords have been shared. I think, the free one that a lot of people know is Have I Been Pwned? If you go, haveibeenpwned.com or whatever by Troy Hunt, that was one of the first ones anyone ever heard about. But it's that's a good one. But at KnowBe4, if you go to knowbe4.com/resources, we have tools that will do it for you, and they're more inclusive. So they will go out again and find either your personal login name and passwords, or they'll do it for your entire organization if that's what you wanted to do. And I think people are very surprised because on average, I think people have 8 login names and passwords that are compromised out there on the internet. And I even run a password manager now, and it checks all the time to see. I've got hundreds of websites in my password manager, and I'm surprised by how often one of those websites will get compromised, and I'm not reading about it in the media, right? It's just my password management tool is like, hey, that login name and password got compromised. You need to go change it. And then days or weeks later, the news article comes out saying that it was compromised. So I'd say show them how their current stuff could be compromised already, and say you need to stop, using identical passwords between different unknown sites.
We have a question from the audience that's live. So the question is, based on your experience, Hi, I'm Scott Lowe with ActualTech Media, and we are here for our final interview of today, where I'm joined by Dean Bolton, who is the Chief Architect for License Fortress. Thank you for coming.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
So, tell me about License Fortress. Give me the 30,000-foot view on what you do.
Yep. License Fortress is all about Oracle software license compliance. Oracle doesn't make it very easy to make sure you stay in compliance. They don't have keys in place to help control it. And so we developed a software and provide services to help customers make sure they stay in compliance and get the best value out of those Oracle software licenses.
So are you a SaaS product or something that's installed on premises? Like what do you sell customers?
Yeah, there's a couple different versions of it, but at the heart of it is the License Fortress Discovery tool. For most customers, that's actually an on-premise installation in there because their Oracle databases, their Oracle applications become business critical. Those tend to be pretty secure. So we have an offering that they can deploy as well to make sure that stays in compliance on-premise.
And you do basically like a network discovery, and you go out and look for Oracle instances. And how do you determine what they have? Is there a fingerprint somewhere?
Well, we do a number of things. It's a layered approach to it. So for VMware customers, we go out to their vCenter and pull in the inventory that way. We can do a network discovery, like you mentioned. We also have integrations with other hypervisors, Hyper-V, OVM, clouds like Amazon and Azure, and just physical environments too. So we try to pull in all of that infrastructure in there for potential places where Oracle might be installed. And then we have a number of different checks to figure out what exactly is installed there. So it might be looking for processes that indicate Oracle's running, looking for files that indicates it's been installed. We have some advanced connections and checking that happens through something like VMware's NSX to see the actual SQL packets going back and forth.
And how do I, as a customer, identify, okay, I've got this much Oracle and this is how much I have in my bill from Oracle. How do I do that delta? Do I put it into License Fortress and you tell me what I'm doing either too much or too little of, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the services that we provide in there is that we take a look at what you purchased from Oracle and map that to what you've deployed from Oracle. And we can tell you not only are you out of compliance that needs to be remediated immediately, but also where you might have some potential savings for licenses you're not using or how to better utilize the licenses that you have.
Okay, so are you sort of a combination of a software and a consulting type? Do you actually do direct customer consulting, I guess is the question?
Yes, we do. We have a lot of customers who go to us in various stages. Projects beginning, they need help figuring out what they need to buy, all the way to customers who are currently in an audit and sometimes very far down the road of an audit and need some expert assistance right away.
And Oracle audits are not known for being super friendly.
Yeah, not too many people are coming out of those being like, that was easy, I'd like to do that every day.
Yeah. So you help them take the pain out of that.
We try to, yeah.
Okay.
There's a lot of work involved in there. Our discovery tool helps automate some of that, but also we've had a lot of experience dealing with Oracle on these audits, and so we kind of know how to control the messaging and make it as painless as possible.
So from a customer perspective, they pay you to do something, but they're going to get a lot more value in the long term because you're going to help them reduce waste and increase efficiency of what they've got, or avoid what could be a pretty stiff penalty from Oracle.
Yeah, that's what we try to do in there. What we really focus on is increasing that Oracle utilization. Oracle licenses aren't cheap, so we want to make sure the customers are getting the best value out of what they paid for.
Are you able to show customers almost like a return on investment for what they've done with you? Like, look, you cost this much, and this is how much we were able to save you, and that sort of thing?
Yeah, that's part of our reporting that we give to customers every quarter in there.
Okay.
They can see it on a real-time basis if they go into the tool to see the utilization in there, but then we also aggregate that on a quarterly basis.
So is License Fortress basically a subscription-based service?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I buy a subscription, and every quarter you kind of take a look, or is it more often?
No, the tool itself, License Fortress Discovery, runs on a real-time basis.
Okay.
So if you have Discovery installed and you configure it to put in what you've purchased from Oracle or have us do it, then the system's aware of what your compliance footprint should be. If anybody makes a change in there that violates that, you get an alert right away.
Okay.
And so because the results are very different in terms of when you make a mistake and address it within minutes, days, hours, versus having it running and nobody knows about it for months or years.
Yeah, Oracle's a little friendlier when it's like, oopsie, it was yesterday, let's fix it.
Yes, exactly. In there's a much stronger case to be made that you don't have a compliance issue that you have to deal with that way.
So I guess one of the questions that would seem to me is you're getting a lot of data around discovery and you're figuring out the Oracle fingerprint basically. Mm-hmm. Could this be extended to other products at some point?
That's in the works. So right now we have the expertise. So I'm an Oracle DBA at heart. I started about 20 years ago in there, and my co-founder Mike Corey started even earlier than that. He started with Oracle version 3.0. So we're Oracle tech guys to start. We have partners who are experts just like us, but on different technologies. So IBM's DB2, Microsoft SQL Server, SAP. We help customers with audits on those, and we're working to develop the real-time monitoring for those as well.
So that's something that, and it could go far and wide. I mean, I think about my whole Microsoft license agreement every year.
Yep.
You could go right down to the Exchange and SQL Server and SharePoint level. I mean, the whole 9 yards if you really wanted to at some point.
SQL Server's right now in beta testing.
Okay.
So we're hoping to have that released to our customers and to potential customers by the end of this year. Then we're staying in the database, so looking at DB2 next and SAP, because we've gotten a good amount of interest from there. After that, roadmap gets a little bit fuzzier in there. So are we going to operating systems like Red Hat and Windows? Are we going to something else? That part of it we're not quite sure yet.
I had a question that escaped me for a second, but I'm sure it'll come back. So you can stick with data, which makes sense because that's where the keys to the kingdom, and that's where a lot of the complexity really is.
Yep.
That people, it's the workhorse of the enterprise.
Yep.
So it makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
What kind of savings have you been able to achieve for customers?
Tons. So there's a lot of confusion around how you're supposed to do the Oracle licensing in there. And that confusion leads to customers overpaying quite a bit. And so what we've seen is from what Oracle would say if you do an audit, the average compliance issue that we find is $2.6 million.
That's like with an M?
Yep, with an M.
Wow.
In there.
That's a lot.
Yep, and that's compared to our average health check cost, not even our service, but just our health check, running under 50,000. You're getting quite a good return on investment from that.
Yeah, that's a pretty stunning number actually. So your customers are, I assume, probably fiercely loyal.
Yep, we do a good job. We try to, and so we think the tool delivers a lot of value in there. So and it's very cost effective to keep it running and making sure you're staying in compliance in there. And then we on the side have a lot of expertise on the technical end. I've been working with Oracle for 20 years. I'm a VMware vExpert, Oracle Certified Master. So we help a lot of our customers once we get the licensing handled with a lot of the technical endeavors as well, performance tuning, optimizations, new projects, etc.
Well, since we're at VMworld, tell me more. I mean, I know you see the deploys. You can basically go to vCenter and take a look at what's happening. But tell me more about how your VMware integration and partnership.
Yeah, so we've been working with VMware for probably close to a decade now. We again started as Oracle experts, and VMware actually reached out to us trying to kind of increase awareness about how you could run Oracle on VMware. And so we really took that to heart and really became evangelists for virtualization. And our first version of License Fortress was built specifically for running Oracle workloads on VMware. Because of that partnership, because of our extensive expertise around it, and also because that seems to be the scenario that causes the most confusion licensing-wise.
Virtualization.
VMware virtualization specifically, yeah.
Okay, because of the CPU, vCPU versus pCPU and all that good stuff?
It's actually because it seems like Oracle just has a negative stance towards VMware. So you tell them you're running on VMware and audit alarms go off. Whereas,
really?
Yeah. If you run on Hyper-V, it's not quite the same. If you run on their stuff, OVM, even though contractually it's exactly the same, the results in an audit are night and day.
Really?
Yeah.
That's unfortunate.
Yep.
It really is. That's sad to hear.
Yep.
This is really impressive. It sounds like you guys are doing a great job. And it's great to see the expansion happening to other databases.
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark, for coming by.
Thank you.
And this is the end of our live stream today. Thank you for joining us as we had a number of really great interviews. Make sure you come back tomorrow for our EcoCast from VMworld. If you'd like to join us, go to events.actualtechmedia.com and register for that event. We'll be talking to 7 or 8 more great vendors here at VMworld with some in-depth discussions about what they're doing and how they do it. And thank you again for watching.